Welcome to the home of the Conversations with Concerned Citizens podcast. Here we talk about real-world issues in hopes to come to a solution. We are a solution-based podcast. We are your hosts, the Lurker and Godmomma. Please hit the like and subscribe if you're new here. We'll start the show shortly. Conversations with Concerned Citizens podcast. The Conversations with Concerned Citizens podcast. The Conversations with Concerned Citizens podcast.
Ooh, and Grand Rising. Happy Hump Day, everybody. We are your host. I am the Lurker, and we have Godmomma. Ooh.
It tries.
It tries. It is the 12th day of our Black History Month. We are also under a full moon, so y'all get prepared for some howling, okay? The wolves will be out. Trust and believe that. Today we're going to be discussing the Welfare Subcommittee. I'm not sure how much we're going to discuss, but we're going to be listening in on the Welfare Subcommittee that blasted off yesterday. Also, real quick, guys, I haven't caught up with the RFK, Tulsi, like I told you guys I was, and the Cash Patel. I haven't heard anything. We had a power.
Didn't Patel, I want to say I saw last night that Patel was swearing in.
Okay. So he did.
And he's supposed to be dropping the Epstein list his first day.
Yeah, I knew that was his plan. I wasn't sure, and I haven't caught up with anything. Okay. So yeah, okay. Cash Patel made it in. Well, go ahead, Cash Patel. Okay, go ahead. And I'll look for it, and if I hear anything, I'll update the community wall, or we'll update right here as we look through it. But before we get into the subcommittee hearing, Trump and Elon did a press conference, I guess, yesterday. I don't know what you would call. I mean, I get it looks like a press conference. I haven't watched it all. But they were in the Oval Office, so let's see what they had to say. There's mixed reviews. Again, I have not watched this all, so I'm not really sure what Elon's going to say, or Trump. And it looks like Elon's child is there with them, so looks like it's a family affair. Well, family, let's get
y'all get comfy, hit that like, and we'll be back.
This is X, and he's a great guy, high IQ. He's a high IQ individual.
And he's got this, check out this cool chain he's got.
So thank you very much. We had a busy day today. The king just left, and we've had a great discussion, terrific discussion concerning Gaza and everything else. We had discussions also about Saturday at 12 o'clock. It's going to be a big moment. We'll see what happens. I don't expect much happening with these people, but we'll see what happens. And we're going to be signing a very important deal today. It's Doge, and I'm going to ask Elon to tell you a little bit about it and some of the things that we found, which are shocking. Billions and billions of dollars in waste, fraud, and abuse. And I think it's very important. And that's one of the reasons I got elected. I said, we're going to do that. Nobody had any idea it was that bad, that sick, and that corrupt. And it seems hard to believe that judges want to try and stop us from looking for corruption, especially when we found hundreds of millions of dollars worth, much more than that, in just a short period of time. We want to weed out the corruption And it seems hard to believe that a judge could say, we don't want you to do that. So maybe we have to look at the judges, because that's a very serious, I think it's a very serious violation. I'll ask Elon Musk to say a few words, and we'll take some questions. Elon, go ahead.
Sure. So at a high level, you say, what is the goal of Doge, and I think a significant part of the presidency is to restore democracy. This may seem like, well, aren't we in a democracy? Well, if you don't have a feedback loop, okay, we'd have to, if you sorry, so tell you gravitas can be difficult sometimes. If there's not a good feedback loop from the people to the government, and if you have rule of the bureaucrat, if the bureaucracy is in charge, and then what meaning does democracy actually have? If the people cannot vote and have their will be decided by their elected representatives in the form of the president and the Senate and the House, then we don't live in a democracy. We live in a bureaucracy. So it's incredibly important that we close that feedback loop, we fix that feedback loop, and that the public's elected representatives, the president, the House, and the Senate, decide what happens, as opposed to a large unelected bureaucracy. This is not to say that there are good people who are in the federal bureaucracy, but you can't have an autonomous federal bureaucracy. You have to have one that's responsive to the people. That's the whole point of a democracy. And if you look at this, if you asked the founders today and said, what do you think of the way things have turned out? Well, we have this unelected, fourth unconstitutional branch of government, which is the bureaucracy, which has, in a lot of ways, currently more power than any elected representative. And this is not something that people want, and it does not match the will of the people. So it's just something we've got to fix. And we've also got to address the deficit. So we've got a $2 trillion deficit, and if we don't do something about this deficit, the country's going bankrupt. I mean, it's really astounding that the interest payments alone on the national debt exceed the Defense Department budget, which is shocking, because we spend a lot of money on defense. But if that just keeps going, we're essentially going to bankrupt the country. So what I really want to say is, like, it's not optional for us to reduce the federal expenses. It's essential. It's essential for America to remain solvent as a country, and it's essential for America to have the resources necessary to provide things to its citizens and not simply be servicing vast amounts of debt.
And also, could you mention some of the things that your team has found, some of the crazy numbers, including the woman that walked away with about 30 million?
Right. Well, we do find it sort of rather odd that there are quite a few people in the bureaucracy who have ostensibly a salary of a few $100,000, but somehow manage to accrue tens of millions of dollars in net worth while they are in that position, which is what happened to USAID. We're just curious as to where it came from. Maybe they're very good at investing, in which case we should take their investment advice, perhaps. But just there seems to be mysteriously they get wealthy. We don't know why. Where does it come from? And I think the reality is that they're getting wealthy at the taxpayer expense. That's the honest truth of it. So we're looking at if you look at say Treasury, for example, basic controls that should be in place that are in place in any company, such as making sure that any given payment has a payment categorization code, that there is a comment field that describes the payment, and that if a payment is on the do not pay list, that you don't actually pay it. None of those things are true currently. So the reason that departments can't pass audits is because the payments don't have a categorization code. It's like just a massive number of blank checks just flying out the building. So you can't reconcile blank checks. You've got comment fields that are also blank, so you don't know why the payment was made. And then we've got this truly absurd, a do not pay list, which can take up to a year for an organization to get on a do not pay list. And this, we're talking about terrorist organizations, we're talking about known fraudsters, known aspects of waste, known things that do not match any congressional appropriation. It can take up to a year to get on the list, and even once on the list is not used. It's mind-blowing. So what we're talking about here, we're really just talking about adding common sense controls that should be present and haven't been present. So you say, like, well, how could such a thing arise? That seems crazy. When you understand that really everything is geared towards complaint minimization, so then you understand the motivations. So if people receive money, they don't complain, obviously. But if people don't receive money, they do complain. And the fraudsters complain the loudest and the fastest. So then when you understand that, then it makes sense. Oh, that's why everything they approve all the payments at Treasury. Because if you approve all the payments, you don't get complaints. But now we're saying that, no, actually, we are going to complain. If money is spent badly, if your taxpayer dollars are not spent in a sensible and frugal manner, then that's not okay. Your tax dollars need to be spent wisely on things that matter to the people. I mean, these things, like, it's just common sense. It's not draconian or radical. I think it's really just saying, let's look at each of these expenditures and say, is this actually in the best interest of the people? And if it is, it's approved. If it's not, we should think about it. So, there's crazy things like just cursory examination of Social Security, and we've got people in there that are 150 years old. Now, do you know anyone who's 150? I don't. Okay. They should be on the Guinness Book of World Records. They're missing out. So, that's a case where, like, I think they're probably dead. It's my guess. Or they should be very famous, one of the two. And then there's a whole bunch of Social Security payments where there's no identifying information. Well, like, why is there no identifying information? Obviously, we want to make sure that people who deserve to receive Social Security do receive it. And another crazy thing. So, one of the things is, like, we are trying to sort of right-size the federal bureaucracy, just make sure that this, obviously, there needs to be a lot of people working for the federal government, but not as many as currently. So we're saying, if people can retire, with full benefits and everything, that would be good. They can retire, get their retirement payments, everything. And then we're told, this is actually, I think, a great anecdote, because we're told that the most number of people that could retire possibly in a month is 10,000. We're like, well, why is that? Well, because all the retirement paperwork is manual on paper. It's manually calculated, then written down on a piece of paper. Then it goes down a mine. And I'm like, what do you mean a mine? Like, yeah, there's a limestone mine where we store all the retirement paperwork. And you look at a picture of this mine. We'll post some pictures afterwards. And this mine looks like something out of the 50s because it was started in 1955. So it looks like it's like a time warp. And then the speed, the limiting factor is the speed at which the mine shaft elevator can move determines how many people can retire from the federal government. And the elevator breaks down sometimes, and then nobody can retire.
Hey,
Please hit the like. Thank you.
my bad. Hey, y'all, I see y'all coming in. What's your name? Shank King, thank you for coming in and showing support today, man. We got Kai in the building. How you doing? And observing stuff. I'm shocked that Kylie said they were both humble. I like the tone and where we're going right now. Let's see what else they got. He's talking about elevators. Okay.
Doesn't that sound crazy? There's like 1,000 people that work on this. So I think if we take those people and say, like, you know what, instead of working in a mine shaft and carrying manila envelopes to boxes in a mine shaft, you could do practically anything else, and you would add to the goods and services of the United States in a more useful way. So anyway, so I think that's an example. Like, at a high level, if you say, like, how do we increase prosperity? Is we get people to shift from roles that are low to negative productivity to high productivity roles, and so you increase the total output of goods and services, which means that there's a higher standard of living available for everyone. That's the actual goal. Everyone's very quiet. So you're only this quiet?
Your detractors, Mr. Moss.
What?
Including a lot of Democrats.
I have detractors?
You do, sir.
I don't believe it.
Say that you're orchestrating a hostile takeover of government and doing it in a non-transparent way. What's your response to that criticism?
Well, first of all, you couldn't ask for a stronger mandate from the public. The public voted. We have a majority of the public voting for President Trump. We won the House. We won the Senate. The people voted for major government reform. There should be no doubt about that. That was on the campaign. The president spoke about that at every rally. The people voted for major government reform, and that's what people are going to get. They're going to get what they voted for. And a lot of times, people, they don't get what they voted for. But in this presidency, they are going to get what they voted for. And that's what democracy is all about.
Mr. Musk, the White House says that you will identify and excuse yourself from any conflicts of interest that you may have. Does that mean that you are, in effect, policing yourself? What are the checks and balances that are in place to ensure that there's accountability and transparency?
Well, we actually are trying to be as transparent as possible. In fact, we post our actions to the Doge handle on X and to the Doge website. So all of our actions are maximally transparent. In fact, I don't think there's been, I don't know of a case where an organization has been more transparent than the Doge organization. So, and the kind of things we're doing are, I think, very, very simple and basic. They're not, what I mentioned, for example, about Treasury, just making sure that payments that go out, taxpayer money that goes out, is categorized correctly, that the payment is explained, that organizations on the do not pay list, which takes a lot to get there, that actually are not paid, which currently they are paid. These are not individual judgment decisions. These are about simply having sensible checks and balances in the system itself to ensure that taxpayer money is spent well. So it's got nothing to do with, like, say, a contract with some company of mine at all.
But if there is a conflict of interest when it comes to you yourself, for instance, you've received billions of dollars in federal contracts when it comes to the Pentagon, for instance, which the president I know has directed you to look into.
Yeah.
Are you policing yourself in that? Is there any sort of accountability check and balance in place that would provide any transparency for the American people?
Well, all of our actions are fully public. So if you see anything, you say, like, wait a second, hey, Elon, that seems like maybe that's, there's a conflict there. It's not like people are going to be shy about saying that. They'll say it immediately.
Including you yourself.
Yes. But transparency is what builds trust, not simply somebody asserting trust. So not somebody saying they're trustworthy, but transparency. So you can see everything that's going on. And then you can see, am I doing something that benefits one of my companies or not? It's totally obvious.
And if we thought that, we would not let him do that segment or look in that area if we thought there was a lack of transparency or a conflict of interest. And we watch that also. He's a big businessman. He's a successful guy. That's why we want him doing this. We don't want an unsuccessful guy doing this. Now, one thing also that Elon hasn't really mentioned are the groups of people that are getting some of these payments. They're ridiculous. And we're talking about billions of dollars that we've already found. We found fraud and abuse. I would say those two words as opposed to the third word that I usually use. But in this case, fraud and abuse. It's abusive because most of these things are virtually made up, or certainly money shouldn't be sent to them. And you know what I'm talking about. It's crazy. So, but we're talking about tens of billions of dollars that we've already found. And now a judge is an activist judge wants to try and stop us from doing this. Why? Why would they want to do that? I campaigned on this. I campaigned on the fact that I said government is corrupt. And it is very corrupt. It's very, very, it's also foolish. As an example, a man has a contract for 3 months and the contract ends, but they keep paying him for the next 20 years, because nobody ends a contract. You get a lot of that. You have a contract that's a 3-month contract. Now, normally, if you're in a small, in all fairness, it's the size of this thing is so big.
Yeah.
But if you have a contract and you're in a regular business, you end the contract in 3 months, it's a consultant. Here's a contract for 3 months, but it goes on for 20 years. And the guy doesn't say that he got money for 20 years, They don't say it. They just keep getting checks month after month. And you have various things like that. And even much worse than that, actually, much worse. And I guess you call that incompetence, maybe. Yeah. It could be corruption. It could be a deals made on both sides, where the guy gets some money, he kicks. I think there's a lot of kickback here. I see a lot of kickback here.
There's a lot of kickbacks.
Tremendous kickback, because nobody could be so stupid to give out some of these contracts. So he has to get a kickback. So that's what I got elected for, that and borders and military and a lot of things, but this is a big part of it. And I hope that the court system is going to allow us to do what we have to do. We got elected to among other things, find all of this fraud, abuse, all of this horrible stuff going on. And we've already found billions of dollars, not like a little bit, billions, many billions of dollars. And when you get down to it, it's going to be probably close to $1 trillion. It could be close to $1 trillion that we're going to find. That will have quite an impact on the budget. And you'll go to a judge where they handpick a judge, and he has certain leanings. I'm not knocking anybody for that, but he has certain leanings, and he wants us to stop looking. How do you stop looking? I mean, we've already found it. We have a case in New York where a hotel has paid $59 million, $59 million because it's housing migrants, illegal migrants. All illegal, I believe.
And they were being paid twice the normal room rate at 100% occupancy.
Unbelievable.
So it's a racket.
Mr. Musk, can I ask a question?
Well, if I may sort of just going for the president's comments, at a high level, okay, well, what are the two ingredients that are really necessary in order to cut the budget deficit in half from 2 trillion to 1 trillion? And it's really two things: competence and caring. And if you add competence and caring, you'll cut the budget deficit in half. And I fully expect to be scrutinized and get a daily proctology exam, basically. Might as well just camp out there. So it's not like I think I can get away with something. I'll be scrutinized nonstop. But with support of the president, we can cut the budget deficit in half from 2 trillion to 1, and then with deregulation, because there's a lot of sort of regulations that don't ultimately serve the public good. We need to free the builders of America to build, and if we do that, that means I think we can get the economic growth to be maybe 3-4%, maybe 5%. And
Not
that
the
means we can
baby
get $1 trillion
picking
economic
his
growth. We
nose
cut the
live
budget
on
deficit.
air, Chad. Not the baby picking his nose.
Oh, shit.
Oh, tell me you don't give a shit about none of this without telling me you
How
don't
many
give a.
people can relate to that? How many people take their kids to work and they're, you know what I mean? Like, it's.
It's and honestly, it's very wholesome to see, right?
Yeah, it is.
Because we rarely get to see a child this size in the Oval Office. We
Mm-hmm.
rarely have ever gotten to see a federal employee bring their child to work.
Mm-hmm.
So whether this was a publicity stunt to kind of get Americans to see a softer side of Elon, shout out to his PR team because that's what it did. Him
Yeah.
bringing his son and his son picking his nose on national TV gave you a softer side of Elon, right? Like maybe he's not a monster.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Maybe. He's
We're
funny.
still
He
open.
said
He
it,
is funny.
he's talking about proctology exams. He said, might as well camp out there.
Might as well. And it's the stutter for me, okay? It's the stutter, it's the nervousness.
The wiping
He
of the
like
sweat.
yes, like you can see this is still a human. He may be on the spectrum, y'all, but
Yeah.
he's still a human being that gets nervous, that he's very humble. Kylie pointed that out. They're in their humbleness right
Mhm.
now. And I think this is what I know a lot of people gave this some backlash on the internet, this rising.
Yeah.
But I do think that the backlash was just coming from something to be mad at. We have to
Mm,
have something to be mad at.
mm. Yeah, because from the snippets I saw, um, it made it look a mess.
Mm-hmm.
But watching this in the full spectrum of it, it's no pun intended. I'm cool with it. This is what we wanted.
Right.
We don't care if it was Kamala and Joe's dumbass up here doing it, but this is the actions is what we wanted. Fuck the people. We want. Excuse my language. I'm sorry. It's still early. It doesn't matter who the person is. We want the actions done. Well,
Mm-hmm.
for me, let me speak for myself and a few others, but that's what we want is transparency, being open. Hell, have these. Y'all need to have these little meetings once a week in the Oval House. What are we doing this week? Every week.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I know they do, but I'm saying at this level, at this kickback type vibe.
By $1 trillion. Between now and next year, there is no inflation. There's no inflation in 26. And if the government is not borrowing as much, it means that interest costs decline. So everyone's the mortgage, their car payment, their credit card bills, anything, their student debt, the monthly payments drop. That's a fantastic scenario for the average American. I mean, imagine they're going down the grocery aisle and the prices from one year to the next are the same, and their mortgage, all the debt payments dropped. How great is that for the average American?
The most affordable 12-month GLP-1 program.
It's great, Elon. We love to see and hear it. Okay, just pull through for us, buddy. That's all we ask.
Well, and the fact that we're like barely still a month in, right? I'm impressed so far. Keep it going. Keep it going. Shake the table, Elon.
We had no
That's what we're
idea. We had no idea we were going to find this much, and it's open. It's not like complicated. It's
It's not that
simple stuff.
complicated.
It's
a
like
lot of work.
we
Yeah.
can't believe it. A lot of work. A lot of smart people involved. Very, very smart people. But you're talking about anywhere maybe $500 billion. It's crazy the kind of numbers you're
It's really
talking
crazy.
about. Normally when you're looking at something, you'll find you're looking for 1 out of 100. Here, you're almost reversing it. You look for one that's good.
Yeah.
And you can look at the title and you say, why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? And the public gets it. The public gets it. You've seen the polls. The public is saying, why are we paying all this money? This is for years. This has gone on. Yeah, go ahead. Wait, go ahead.
Senator Rand Paul today said that DOGE cuts will ultimately need a vote in Congress. Do you agree with that? Is that the
I
plan?
really don't know. I know this. We're finding tremendous fraud and tremendous abuse. If I need a vote of Congress to find fraud and abuse, it's fine with me. I think we'll get the vote. Although there'll be some people that wouldn't vote. And how could a judge want to hold us back from finding all of this fraud and finding all of this incompetence? Why would that happen? Why would even Congress want to do that? Now, Congress, if we do need a vote, I think we get a very easy vote because we have a track record now. We've already found billions of dollars of abuse, incompetence, and corruption. A lot of corruption.
If a judge does block one of your policies, part of your agenda, will you abide by that ruling? Will you comply?
Well, I always abide by the courts, and then I'll have to appeal it. But then what he's done is he slowed down the momentum, and it gives crooked people more time to cover up the books. You know, if a person's crooked and they get caught, other people see that, and all of a sudden it becomes harder later on. So, yeah, the answer is I always abide by the courts, always abide by them, and will appeal. But appeals take a long time, and I would hope that a judge, if you go into a judge and you show him, here's a corrupt situation, we have a check to be sent, but we found it to be corrupt. Do you want us to send this corrupt check to a person, or do you want us not to give it and give it back to the taxpayer? I would hope a judge would say, don't send it, give it back to the taxpayer.
Yeah, if I can add that, what we're finding is that a bunch of the fraud is not even going to Americans. So I think we can all agree that if there's going to be fraud, it should at least go to Americans. But a bunch of the fraud rings that are operating in the United States and taking advantage of the federal government, especially in the entitlements programs, are actually foreign fraud rings that are operating in other countries and actually exporting money to other countries. We should stop that. And this is big numbers. We're talking about $100 to $200 billion a year. Sure. Serious money.
Mr. Musk, you said on X that an example of the fraud that you have cited was $50 million of condoms was sent to Gaza. But after fact-check this, apparently Gaza in Mozambique, and the program was to protect them against HIV. So can you correct this statement that it wasn't sent to Hamas, actually, it was sent to Mozambique, which makes sense why condoms was sent there. Yeah. And how can we make sure that all the statements that you said were correct, so we can trust what you say?
Well, first of all, some of the things that I say will be incorrect and should be corrected. So nobody's going to bat 1,000. I mean, we will make mistakes, but we'll act quickly to correct any mistakes. I'm not sure we should be sending $50 million worth of condoms to anywhere, frankly. I'm not sure that's something Americans would be really excited about. And that is really an enormous number of condoms, if you think about it. But if it went to Mozambique instead of Gaza, I'm like, okay, that's not as bad, but still, why are we doing that?
Can you talk a little bit about how closely you're working with agency heads as you're directing these cuts? Do they have how much input do agency heads have when you're making these decisions?
Yeah, we work closely with the agency heads. So there are sort of checks in place. So it's not us just going in and doing things willy-nilly. It's in partnership with the agency heads, and I check regularly with the president to make sure that this is what the president wants to have happen. So we talk almost every day, and I double check things to make sure, is this something, Mr. President, you want us to do this? Then we'll do it.
USAID has been one of your main targets. Are you concerned at all that some of the cuts or that shutting that agency altogether may lead to diseases or other bigger problems starting in other countries that then come to the United States? Yeah, so that's an interesting example. So that's something where we work closely with the State Department and Secretary Rubio. And we have, for example, turned on funding for Ebola prevention and for HIV prevention. Yes, correct. And we are moving fast, so we will make mistakes, but we'll also fix the mistakes very quickly. So, do you see it as a worthy cause, USAID? I think that there's some worthy things, but overall, if you say what was the bang for the buck, I would say it was not very good. And there was far too much of what USAID was doing was influencing elections in ways that I think were dubious and do not stand the light of day.
If I could just have to follow up to the Pentagon contracts. If you have received billions of dollars in contracts from the Pentagon, and the president's directing you to look into the Department of Defense, is that a conflict of interest?
Are going to do at the president's request.
Does that present a conflict of interest for you?
No, because you'd have to look at the individual contract and say, first of all, I'm not the one, filing the contract. It's people at SpaceX or someone who will be putting for the contract. And I'd like to say, if you see any contract where where it was awarded to SpaceX and it wasn't by far the best value for money for the taxpayer, let me know, because every one of them was.
The president said the other day that you might look at treasuries. Could you explain that a little bit? What kind of fraud? And that question goes to both of you. What kind of fraud are you expecting to see, or do you see right now in U.S. treasuries?
Yeah, I think you mean the Treasury Department as opposed to Treasury bills. Or
you also referenced treasuries on Air Force One the other night.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, really the first order of business is to make sure we're actually collecting. Sorry for this. Although my son might enjoy this, but he's sticking his fingers in my ears and stuff. So it's been hard to hear sometimes. Hey, stop that. The stuff we're doing with Treasury Department is so basic that you can't believe it doesn't exist already. So for example, like I mentioned, just making sure that when a payment goes out, it has to have a payment categorization code. It's like, what type of payment is this? You can't just leave the field blank. Currently, many payments, the field is left blank. And you have to describe what's the payment for, some basic rationalization. That also is left blank. So this is why the Pentagon. When's the last time the Pentagon passed an audit? I mean, a decade ago, maybe. I don't know, ever, really. And we want to just, in order to actually pass audits, you have to have financial information that allows you to trace the payments. And once in a while, the Treasury has to pause payments if it thinks the payment is going to a fraudulent organization.
I mean, is anybody in the chat upset with anything Mr. Elon has said, or do you feel like he's not giving you enough? I need some feedback. I'm not either. So I need some feedback from my concerned citizens in the chat. Like, is he not doing enough? Is he doing too much? I think, Kylie, he's kind of answered your question in a sense of, does he not report to the president? Or he answered that question, and he says, everything, he runs it by Trump, and he says, hey, do you want me to do this or not? And, so they kind of have a back and forth relationship where, he doesn't act before asking. And to me, he's kind of put that boogeyman to rest. Y'all let me know in the chat what y'all think.
Okay. Observing Stuff said, is Elon vice president now? Where were you yesterday when they were saying one's a king and one's a queen? You're neutral. I am too, because again, this is my personal opinion, y'all. I don't trust nobody right now. So if Elon said he's willing to build trust by being transparent, okay, well, then allow me to build it one brick at a time. Okay? One brick at a dang time. Just because you're doing something great and fancy over here, you know what I'm saying? Again, the best indicator of the future is the past. So we've had some good showmanship before. Hell, we had Obama. He was one of the best showmen. Okay? So I'm not holding my breath, I'm not withholding bricks, but it takes time on both sides. So, yeah, that's where I'm at with it. And then, Coco, what'd you say, Mama? Coco says she's okay right now. People are upset that Trump fired officials for oversight, but obviously they weren't doing their job. And this happens at our own jobs. Don't think you can go to the company and waste company time, company product. Right. Oh no, baby. They'll fire you, but in some cases you might even get arrested for it. Don't be playing on the clock. So
yes, you will get arrested, charged with fraud, all kind of thing. Okay, stealing company time is a real thing.
It is. It is.
And the companies don't play. In America, we should not play either when it comes to someone stealing company time. Like he just said, some of these people's contracts technically were supposed to be over 3-4 months ago, but they're still receiving payments. Where do they do that at?
He said sometimes the contracts are only for 3 months, and 20 years later, they're still getting money.
Crazy.
That's wild. And like he said, what she said, oh, I'm on board with solutions, not blame. That's right, Kylie. You did say that neutralization of how they're not doing the blame. I agree with you on that. Okay, I forgot what I was going to say. My bad. Are we upset about the change of locations for the condoms? No. It's still $50 million on condoms. We don't even need to be spending $50 million on condoms for our own country. What? Come on now. Stop.
50 million in condoms. This is wild.
It don't matter where it went. And then they tried to, I couldn't hear what she said, so I'll have to go back and listen to it. She said something about it was for HIV prevention or something like that.
Last time I checked, condoms don't prevent from HIV, correct? Isn't HIV virus small enough that it can weave itself in between the quote unquote, I'm using air quotes, fabric of the condom? Or did I just make that up?
I'm not sure.
Because
There's
I be
nothing.
making shit up, y'all.
Okay, yeah, I'm not sure, but again, it's unnecessary expenditure right now. Now, there's a lot of other things we could be putting that $50 million towards the HIV, but again, and we don't have 504 in the building. She usually corrects us and guides us in the right way, but that'll be coming up soon enough. And actually, we need to put that in our notes, Godmomma, about the condoms, okay? From when we talk to her. Observing stuff. What's wrong with buying condoms? Nothing. Buy them yourself. How about that? Okay.
Or go to the fucking. They still give them away for the free at the health clinic.
Yeah, I'm sure that's government funded too, though.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's just, I don't know, 50 million, it just seems, that's excessive to me. How many condoms do you get for 50 million, bro? Like, that's enough for the whole world. It sounds like it should be, right? 50 million, we should never need condoms for anybody ever again after that. That's
average
a
price for condoms.
Oh gosh. I'm just wondering though. Like that's a lot of condoms. That's a lot of sperm. That's a lot of fucking. That's a lot of sex.
So you can get 12 for $7. So that, oh my God. So 50 million, if a condom is less than a penny.
Thank you. That's what I'm saying, Godmomma. The quantity of the you know what I mean? The mass volume of condoms.
On average, condoms cost about $1 each, but it may be less or more depending upon the brand, store, and package. 12 or more usually cost less than $1. So if you're buying 12 or more, they're going to be less than $1. $50 million.
But even okay, so is that for consumer price or is that wholesale?
That's
Right?
consumer price. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if we buy them at wholesale, like you said, you buy 12, you get them cheaper. You buy 50 million. That's a lot, y'all. That's just a lot of condoms. It really is. It's communicable through body fluid, so condoms only prevent that version of fluid.
Mm.
Okay. That really. What's up, Roy? Hey, baby. Hit that like while
Hey,
you're
Roy.
here. Okay, we're almost done with Trump and Elon, and then we're going to hop over to welfare, y'all. And I have not watched any of the welfare, so this is all going to be news to me.
If a company or an organization is on a do not pay list, we should not pay it. I'm sure you would agree. Like if it's quite hard to get on that payment list, the do not pay list, it means that this is someone that is like dead people, terrorists, known fraudsters, that kind of thing. We should not pay them. But currently we do, which is crazy. We should stop that.
Many transactions. And by the way, hundreds, thousands of transactions like that. You know, we have a big team. And for the sake of the country, I hope that the person that's in charge and the other people that report to me that are in charge are allowed to do the right thing, namely make sure everything's honest, legitimate, and competent. But we're looking at just when you look at USAID, that's one. We're going to look at the military. We're going to look at education. They're much bigger areas. But the USAID is really corrupt out there. It's corrupt. It's incompetent, and it's really corrupt. And I can't imagine a judge saying, well, it may be corrupt, but you don't have the right. You got elected to look over the country and to, as we say, make America great again, but you don't have the right to go and look and see whether or not things are right that they're paying or that things are honest that they're paying. And nobody can even believe this. Other people, law professors, they've been saying, how can you take that person's right away? You're supposed to be running the country, but we're not allowed to look at who they're paying it to and what they're paying. We have massive amounts of fraud that we caught. I think we probably caught way over a lot of billions of dollars already in 2 weeks?
Yes. And
it's going to go to numbers that you're not going to believe. And much, as I said, much is incompetence and much is dishonesty. We have to catch it. And the only way we're going to catch it is to look for it. And if a judge is going to say you're not allowed to look for it, that's pretty sad for our country. I don't understand how it could even work.
Sir, program, can you personally guarantee that
Which one?
The buyout program, the offer to federal workers, can you personally guarantee that the workers who opt in to resign now will be paid through
Well,
September?
they'll get their money, but they're getting a good deal. They're getting a big buyout. And what we're trying to do is reduce government. We have too many people. We have office space. It's occupied by 4%. Nobody's showing up to work because they were told not to. And then Biden gave them a 5-year pass, some of them, 48,000 of them, gave them a 5-year pass that for 5 years, you don't have to show up to work. And let me tell you, this is largely, a bunch of this stuff is because of Biden. It's his fault. He allowed this country, what he did on our border. What he did on our border is almost not as bad as what he did with all of these contracts that have come out. It's a very sad day when we look at it. I can't even believe it. But many contracts just extend and they just keep extending. And there was
Trump was doing so good, he couldn't help himself. He almost made it the whole way without bringing up Biden. He couldn't help himself.
nobody there to correct it. And that cannot be, I can't imagine that could be held up by the court. Any court that would say that the president or his representatives, like Secretary of the Treasury, Secretary of State, whatever, doesn't have the right to go over their books and make sure everything's honest. I mean, how can you have a country? You can't have anything that way. You can't have a business that way. You can't have a country that way. Hey, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Child, he almost made it. He had to include that in his closing statement. Well, Biden administration, total dump. Well, either way, that was a decent press conference. Probably the best I've seen so far as quote unquote transparency and what's going on. It is disheartening to hear that a judge would want to sign off and not allow us to look into where the money's being spent. That's bizarre. You're supposed to be an honorable judge. Don't block that. Don't do that. It was good, Coco. It was. I enjoyed that one. Which he could be right, but again, there are decades of corruption beyond Biden. And just to throw this out here to be petty, fuck it. Why not? Biden was a career politician, so yeah. Every once in a while, throw a little jab here and there. He's a career politician. So, and on both sides, there's a lot of career politicians on both sides, y'all. All right, family, we're switching gears. This one here is going to be a little while. I'm not sure how many times we're going to pause for commentary. I'm going to be listening in. I've got some laundry I need to go switch out. And whoop-de-whoop, but let's listen in. And again, I'm not sure if I'll play this whole one because this one's 2 hours. And we've been knocking out some shows, okay? We've been knocking out some shows. And tomorrow we'll be taking the day off. They know it would expose too much info. That's what I think, Dougie Fresh. That's what I think. Don't be shy. Let us see it. And I don't know. I have a lot of conspiracy thoughts, but I'll save those for another day. All right, y'all. Let's see what they got to say about the welfare system.
In 1960, around 5% of the children were born to unmarried women. Today, that number is around 40%. To anybody who cares about the next generation, these numbers should be deeply concerning. Marriage is the backbone of a stable society and is a force that encourages individuals to be responsible for their families instead of having to rely on government assistance. Not only is marriage associated with better financial institutions, but it's also associated with better mental health for married couples and their children. While I personally know many single parents who've done an excellent job, studies have shown that children raised in single-parent households are at heightened risk for substance abuse, crime, bad educational outcomes, depression, and other disorders. Given that federal policy should reflect the fact that children, it is time that federal policy be changed so we stop discouraging and penalizing people for simply getting married. To better understand why this is the case, we must go back to the creation of these programs. While some welfare programs began under Franklin Roosevelt, most were created or expanded under President Lyndon Johnson's so-called war on poverty. President Johnson's stated goal in expanding the welfare state was to provide Americans with a chance to pull themselves out of poverty and reduce dependency. It was intended to enable Americans who had stumbled on hard times to make a comeback, but that's too often not the case of today's welfare system. Our current welfare system is designed to ensure dependence on to ensure dependence on government and penalizes marriage. Sadly, the problems don't stop there. Many of the benefits paid for by taxpayer dollars are improperly going to illegal immigrants. In 2023, the federal government spent $23 billion on health care for illegal immigrants and another $11.6 trillion on food stamps, child nutrition, and other welfare programs. Not only are we spending billions on illegal immigrants, but often welfare programs are among the most common targets for scammers and fraudsters. Last year, more than $100 billion in improper payments were made in programs like Medicaid, food stamps, and the income tax credit. This is bad for taxpayers, but bad for welfare recipients as well. If we continue our current path, it will be increasingly difficult to fund welfare programs, making it hard to justify the safety net for Americans. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today and to better understand, and they will help us better understand the enormous growth of the welfare state. So we want to see what we can do to prevent government dependency and empower Americans. I should point out there have always been people who are hostile, outright hostile to the idea of marriage. I know a lot of the radical feminists, Kate Millay and that crew in the 1960s, did not want to have a man in the family. Of course, Karl Marx, for people who follow him, also felt the family was a negative impact on society, wanted to destroy it. So we don't want to have Kate Millay or Karl Marx get their way. Hence, we're having this hearing. Now, I yield to Ranking Member Krista Morthy for the statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking forward to working with you on the important issues confronting our nation within the jurisdiction of this subcommittee. Particularly, I'm looking forward to addressing the continuing failures and costs of our broken healthcare system. I will confess that I hope that our first hearing together would have tackled one of those vital issues, such as PBM or healthcare insurance reform. Chairman Grothman, you and I have been working with Chairman Comer and the Democrats for years to try to rein in the abuses of pharmacy benefit managers. We have further worked on concerns about health insurance companies stopping payments for critical medical services, such as, for instance, anesthesia. Anesthesia rules limiting the use of anesthesia mid-operation that were about to be implemented this past winter. But sadly, this committee is focused today on antiquated debates about welfare. I know what I'm talking about when it comes to safety net programs because I have personal experience with SNAP's predecessor, the food stamp program. I came to this country with my family when I was 3 months old so my father could continue his education and our family could embrace all the opportunities that America afforded it. But despite my family's best efforts, it wasn't always easy. Specifically in the recession of 1973, my father lost his income. But thanks to the generosity of the people of the United States, its government, and the existence of these safety net programs, we were allowed to survive and flourish. Today, my father, who turned 86 today, it's his birthday, is an engineering professor emeritus, having retired after 40 years of teaching engineering at Bradley University in Peoria, Illinois. My brother is a doctor at the University of Chicago, and myself, I'm honored to represent the people of Illinois' 8th congressional district in my 5th term. That's the American dream, the promise of a middle-class life with the opportunity for your children to have an even better life than you did. That dream was possible for my family because of my parents' hard work and the possibilities and generosity of this country. However, it was also because the American people established programs like SNAP and public housing, so my family could temporarily sustain itself in times of severe need. For families like mine, access to public housing and SNAP served as a critical social safety net and allowed us to bounce back from financial adversity. It remains true today for tens of millions of struggling Americans. House and Senate Republicans, according to recent reports, are discussing an upwards of $2 trillion cut to Medicaid, almost 1/3 of its funding. This does not sound to me like simply rooting out waste and fraud. Unfortunately, it sounds like forcing tens of millions of children, pregnant women, seniors, and people from programs they desperately need. Helping our neighbors through safety net programs is good economic policy. In 2025, the USDA found that in an economic downturn, every dollar in additional SNAP benefits leads to a $1.54 increase in the gross domestic product. This does not surprise me. Social safety net programs do not encourage laziness. They empower Americans to succeed on their own. The demonization of benefit recipients is appalling. We will unfortunately hear shortly the untrue characterizations of lower income people that have been made by the majority, which undermine the credibility of the reforms they offer. People on public benefits are not lazy, they're not dumb, and they're not bad people. Often, like my own family, they've fallen on hard times and they simply need a hand up. The help they seek, they hope, is temporary. The difference we make in their lives lasts a lifetime. I'm not going to silently acquiesce to this Congress turning its back on hungry, frightened, cold children or their families anywhere in this country who need help in order for the majority to pay for tax cuts for special interests. That's wrong. I hope that this hearing shines light on the good work our country does every day in feeding, housing, and caring for its people. Thank you, and I yield back.
Okay. I don't believe I demonized any people. I try to demonize the politicians who set up the program, not the people who wind up doing what they are, in essence, paid to do. But to our sad disappointment, to all our wonderful people who showed up here, we now have to vote on the floor. So I apologize. We're going to reconvene, what should we say, 10 minutes after they bang the gavel downstairs. So we will see you guys again, and wish we would have brought you pizza or something or other, but yeah. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for coming.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Yeah. Hey, thanks. Thank you.
Core feature.
At the independent a document called Examining the Growth of the Welfare State, put together by Hayden Dubois and Jonathan Ingram, and they work for I assume a think tank thing labeled FGA. Thank you. Okay, I'd like to welcome our witnesses today, Dr. Robert Rector, Ms. Patrice Onwunka, and Dr. Michael Lendon. Mr. Rector is a senior research fellow at the Heritage Foundation Center for Health and Welfare. Ms. Onwunka is the director of the Center for Health and Welfare at the Independent Women's Forum. Dr. Linden is a senior policy fellow at the Washington Center for Equitable Growth. We look forward to hearing what you all have to say on today's important topic. Pursuant to Committee Rule 9G, I hope they warned you this in advance. The witnesses will please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony here is about affirm that the testimony which you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record show all the witnesses answer in the affirmative. Thank you. You may sit down again. We appreciate you being here today and look forward to your testimony. I'd like to remind the witnesses that we have read your written statement already and it will appear in full in the hearing record. If you can, please limit your oral statement to 5 minutes. As a reminder, please press the button on the microphone in front of you so that it's on and the members can hear you. When you begin to speak, the light in front of you will turn green. After 4 minutes, the light will turn yellow. When the red light comes on, it means 5 minutes is up. And we'd like to ask you to wrap up as quickly as you can. I now recognize Mr. Rector for the opening statement.
Thank you.
Did the music get too loud? Sorry, I had to step away.
There we go. Thank you for the opportunity to come here and speak today.
It's just
I've
we play
worked
the
on the
background.
welfare system for 40 years, going back to
Take it off.
President Carter. So the issues are very dear to my heart. And today I'd like to talk about
Okay, is that
one of
better?
the core features of the welfare state, perhaps the core feature that is largely neglected, which is the marriage penalties within the welfare state. Now, those of you that are Republicans, you know all about marginal tax rates on labor. Everyone that's in the Republican Party knows about marginal tax rates on labor, you know. And so the marginal tax rate on labor, if you go out and you earn $20 and the government takes away half of it, that would be a marginal tax rate of 50%. Everybody says, oh, that's kind of bad. What we don't know is marginal tax rates on marriage, okay? When Republicans hear about marriage penalties, they're thinking about marriage penalties in the income tax code, which means basically families that pay income tax, which are those in the top half of the population, above $110,000 a year. But the marriage penalties are not in the income tax code. They're in the $1.6 trillion welfare state. There are 90 means-tested welfare programs, including 40 that go predominantly to families with kids, meaning single-parent families. And every one of those programs has an outrageous marginal tax rate on marriage, a penalty on marriage. So that we talk about marginal tax rates on labor, okay, it would be very high if we earn $1 and the government took away half of it. But the marginal tax rates on marriage are infant, okay? At least with the marginal tax rate on labor, if you work more, you get to keep something of it. But if you are a low-income family, a potential mother and father, you face a net loss in income, a net negative in income when you get married. It's as if you went to work and you earn $20 an hour and the government dinged you for $100. The more you work, the more you lose. It is a confiscation rate. It's not a marginal tax rate. And the reality of that is because all of the welfare programs, all of these 90 programs, they, for the most part, give maximum benefits when there's no earnings in the household. And then as earnings go up, the benefits go down, right? But earnings are all the earnings in the household, the mothers and the fathers. So if the father is in the household and he's married and he holds a job, your earnings went up, your welfare benefits are confiscated and they fall dramatically, such that if you look at the testimony I put in, that if you, let's take a family with a mother that makes $20,000 a year, a father makes $30,000 a year, let's say they have 2 kids. If they are not married, and they cohabit, they could have a joint income of around $80,000 from their earnings, plus about $30,000 coming out of the welfare state. However, if they marry, they lose $15,000 of that. It's a tax rate of about 30% on their original earnings beforehand. If they are in housing, Section 8 or public housing, then their combined benefits, if they're not married, are over $90,000 earnings plus cash, food, housing, medical care, and housing. But if they get married, they, out of that $93,000, they're going to lose $28,000 in penalties. And the answer is they don't get married because we've made marriage economically irrational for them through these horrendous penalties. And what we need to do is rebuild marriage, because if you look today, 1 out of 4 children in the United States are born to an unmarried woman who is cohabiting with the father of the child at the time of marriage. They often remain together for 10 years later, but they don't get married. Why don't they get married? Because this institution will penalize them, will take their money away when they do. We need to stop doing that. We need to take all of the waste and fraud and abuse. There's a 30% waste and fraud rate in the EITC. Take some of that money, save it, and apply it over to giving more generous benefits to these low-income couples when they do get married and they do the right thing. And I think that you will have an enormous behavioral response to that. We also need to tighten up the work requirements on all of these programs. I was a principal author of welfare reform in the 1990s, and we believe that the work requirements would not have so much an effect on labor, but an effect on family formation, and they did. For example, the non-marital teen pregnancy rate, when we put work requirements in, it dropped about 70 to 80% immediately, and it did that also by reducing abortions at the same time. So the public that we're talking about, no, they're not evil. They, in fact, want to do the right thing. And the right thing is to form a stable family and raise kids that way. But they can't do that because you're going to penalize them for doing it. That's a terrible thing. We shouldn't do it anymore.
Thank you very much, Ms. Onwuka.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member and members, for inviting me to appear today. I am the Director of the Center for Economic Opportunity at Independent Women. And we know this is an important topic because we speak to about women and their issues. And we recognize that we've made significant strides in this nation in attacking poverty, but there's still a lot of failures. And particularly as a Black woman and the Black family, we've seen the impact of welfare policies on Black families. As has been mentioned, over 80 welfare programs spending $1 trillion, yet we have so much duplication and opportunities for waste, fraud, and abuse. So how can we overcome some of these challenges? Well, I'll just mention today, we want to close the loopholes that federal agencies and states exploit to grow program enrollment. We want to target improper payments, and we want to promote work and family. I will just say a word on our poverty rate. Right now, we have 36.8 million people living in poverty, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. Although when you calculate people who receive non-cash payments, in-kind, housing, other forms of subsidies, I think the actual poverty rate is much smaller, which is a good thing. But how do we ensure that these folks who are still unable to enjoy the benefits of prosperity are able to do that and be independent? When it comes to the actual fiscal impact of welfare programs, we're seeing that they're growing exponentially. 34% is expected to be the increase in welfare spending over the next 10 years. And we're talking about going from 1.2 trillion to 1.6 trillion. We have many welfare programs, many agencies tackling a lot of the same different problems. 15 agencies dedicated to providing food aid alone, 13 hitting housing, 12 hitting healthcare, and 5 hitting cash aid. So where can Congress focus its energy? Well, I think reforming eligibility and participation to, I say, quote, right size these mandatory and mandatory spending welfare programs. So talking about some of the loopholes, we say states and frankly, the federal government have relaxed some eligibility requirements or expanded the definition of who is needy. In the latter case, states are providing benefits to individuals earning far above the poverty rates and the poverty line. We know very often, or I think we're familiar here, that SNAP grants categorical eligibility to TANF enrollees. And that means that these folks are being exempted from program income and asset limits. That's a loophole. At an expected cost of over $111 billion over the next decade to taxpayers. So this is one of the loopholes that we should be figuring out how to close. We also want to make sure that when we look at the types of people who are participating in welfare programs, we want to make sure that these are folks who are taking advantage of the millions of open positions that are available in this economy, right? And so a lot of these folks are able-bodied Americans, both those with children and without children. And I think that there's a case to be made that we can, whether you're talking about Medicare, SNAP, or TANF, you have 60% rates or above of non-disabled adults who are able to work but receiving these benefits. So how can we get them to work? Well, part of it is that states have been waiving or have been able to waive requirements that individuals are working. Or sometimes states are using backdoor ways to dedicate federal funded money to other priorities that are not promoting work and family formation, frankly. So I think these are the ways that we need to attack the perverse incentives that encourage states and federal government to reduce the dependency rates, whether you're talking about SNAP or some of the other programs. Fraud, waste, and abuse. It is not surprising that there is a lot of fraud and waste and abuse, and this is created because there's not a good amount of tracking of how much there is. The GAO estimated that taxpayers have lost probably $2.7 trillion over the past 10 years, between $200 and maybe $500 billion annually on fraudulent payments. While the GAO has already provided to Congress a roadmap for how to attack these things. Better that federal agencies that are providing welfare benefits are not the ones that should be receiving it. And then, and going forward, being prepared for the emergencies that happen. And I think during COVID, we saw a tremendous expansion in our welfare programs, and we haven't seen a rescission back down to normal levels, despite an economy that's generating millions of jobs, as we know. Finally, a quick point on marriage. There is a marriage penalty, and I think that marriage is an important part of this conversation. And we know that the success series, if you just graduate with a high school diploma, if you get a job and get married before having children, your likelihood of falling into poverty drops significantly. And even if you don't, even if you're a single mom and you get married, the poverty rate falls as well. So we cannot leave marriage out of discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. London.
Thank you, Chairman Grothman, Ranking Member Krishnamurthy, members of the committee. I really want to thank you for my opportunity to be here today. Today, I'm going to make three main points. First of all, federal investments in health, nutrition, housing, and other work supports for low and very low income people are both a moral and an economic necessity. The major problem with our current approach is that we don't do enough to make sure that low income children have a real path out of poverty and that struggling families have a real chance at the middle class. Interested in efficiency and cost savings, you're looking in the wrong place. The federal tax code is rife with loopholes, special subsidies, and giveaways that benefit the very wealthy and giant corporations with little or no discernible public benefit. Third, it is frankly indefensible to scapegoat hardworking Americans who are striving every day just to make ends meet, while the ultra-wealthy and giant corporations have been given trillions, literally trillions in tax breaks. And even as we speak, this Congress is proposing yet another round of tax handouts. Investments in healthcare, nutrition, and housing, and other work supports pay enormous dividends, not only for those families, but for the entire U.S. economy. Children who receive nutrition assistance have better health and lower healthcare costs their whole lives. Children whose mothers receive WIC do better in school than children whose mothers did not. Children of families who use rental assistance earn more as adults and are less likely to become single parents. Boosting the incomes of very poor families, including through, for example, the EITC or the child tax credit, results in more schooling, more hours worked, higher earnings in adulthood for children of those families. Medicaid expansion has resulted in better financial security for millions, lower eviction rates, lower costs for hospitals, especially rural hospitals, fewer premature deaths, and positive statewide economic impacts. These conclusions and the many others like them are drawn from literally hundreds of studies. The facts are not disputed. But you don't have to pore over studies to find the benefits of these investments. You just have to talk to the people who actually use them. And the ranking member spoke eloquently of his own experience with this. Take the story of Zoe, a young woman from Colorado who recently shared her story with the ARC of the United States. She completed a 4-year college degree like so many other people of her age and is now applying to grad schools. Zoe has spinal muscular atrophy, or SMA, which is a genetic neuromuscular development disability. She relies on the caregiver support she receives through Medicaid in order to live independently while she pursues her education. For Zoe and the millions of other Americans who rely on Medicaid, 1 in 5, in fact, slashing these programs would have devastating effects on their lives and their livelihoods. We invest too little, not too much, in reducing poverty and providing pathways into the middle class. The federal government spent just 1.3% of gross domestic product on income supports in 2024, which is down from 1.8% a decade ago, and lower than the average of 2% from the last 30 years.
These are, I don't know
Roughly
if
1 in 5 children is in poverty today, which is twice the rate of
But I
other
think you
developed
just stick it in
countries.
like the.
These numbers are especially concerning given
Oh
that there
no,
are
because you have to
more
do
working
that
age
here.
Americans in the labor force and working today than at almost any time in modern history. And that's why it is a grave mistake, both morally and economically, to slash the benefits and services for low-income people. And don't be fooled. Adding bureaucratic red tape, narrowing eligibility requirements, setting arbitrary limits, all amount to the same thing: indefensible harm to poor families and our economy. But there is another place in the federal budget that is truly bloated with wasteful costs and subsidies and counterproductive incentives, and that's the tax code. Over the past quarter century, Congress has repeatedly enacted trillions of dollars in tax cuts that disproportionately benefit the wealthy. Consider the 40% reduction in the corporate tax rate that was passed in 2017 under President Trump. That single giveaway is estimated to have cost roughly $1 trillion to date and will cost trillions more over the next decade. These corporations did not raise wages or create more jobs. They enriched their shareholders and their executives. That's the very definition of wasteful spending. Those who are quick to scrutinize the choices of a poor family receiving $6 a day in nutrition benefits never seem to get around to asking whether a giant corporation is doing what they promised to do with their tax cuts or whether they needed them in the first place. The truth is that far too many Americans are struggling to make ends meet while those at the top get richer and richer. And that is why most Americans support investing more, not less, in aid to poor families. And that's why I find it surprising that Congress is considering spending another $5 trillion or more, not on lowering healthcare costs or improving public schools or expanding benefits to address marriage penalties, but to give tax cuts, mostly to people at the top. It's hard to take seriously claims that we spend too much on poor families as policymakers write a budget that would take money out of their pockets to give it to billionaires. That's not effective government. That's highway robbery. Anyone truly interested in improving the efficiency and reducing waste in the federal government should be appalled by efforts to scapegoat those living in poverty while padding the pockets of the super wealthy.
Well, thank you. I'm going to lead off with Mr. Rector. I think the purpose of this hearing is to see whether it's appropriate. We're supposed to treat all Americans equally, but whether it's appropriate to design programs such that we are doing what we can to discourage formation of the traditional American family. We'll start off with Mr. Rector. How many welfare programs penalize married couples about, do you think?
Yeah, there are 90 such programs. Every single one of them has a significant marriage penalty. It's the way to understand these programs is as if you had the income tax code where you didn't have a category married filing jointly. So that as soon as you got married, you would be moved into a higher tax bracket and you would be penalized. Every program is designed like that. That makes no sense, okay? It never has made any sense. I've been watching this for 40 years and it won't make sense tomorrow. We need to stop doing that.
Okay. Can you give me just a couple of maybe common programs that seem as if they were designed to punish traditional married couples?
Absolutely. Food stamps, Section 8 housing, Medicaid, the Earned Income Tax Credit, WIC. Every single one of these programs operates this way, that if you get married to an employed man, to the employed father, you lose roughly half of those benefits. And I mean, we just said, this is just, it doesn't make any sense. And it's an irony that most poor people understand this. They understand that they're going to lose benefits if they get married. So they cohabit, right? But they don't form stable bonds. They don't make public commitments and so forth, because we basically said, don't do that. You can hide the father in the home to cohabit with him. Just don't tell us about it, okay? And you'll be doing fine. But if you were to go out and make a public commitment and so forth and so on, well, we're going to take $25,000 away from you. It's an absolutely nutty system, but it's a system that we have.
He's not telling a nary lie either. Okay. One of the things we were told before we got
how much we spend
married was how you're not going to get any tax cuts. You're actually going to get thrown into a different bracket. There is no, even though America wants to sit and scream this, nuclear family, they do not give any exemptions. They don't give any bonuses. They don't give nothing to nobody that is a nuclear family. So he ain't telling a lie. That's why a lot of the women don't get married, because you're going to take their food stamps away from them. You're going to take this away from them. You're going to take that and this and that. And the man works at McDonald's. It's not like he's working at a plant where he's making $30, $40 an hour. He's working at McDonald's. Again, do I think people should be lifers on the welfare system? No, unless you have a disability. However, there has to be some more, something else has to happen. And I was thinking about this last night, how if Elon and them start cutting all of these unnecessary spendages, then we will have room for putting more money into welfare. We can't afford free healthcare right now, y'all. I know that's been one of the biggest things that people, why can't America have free healthcare? Because we're $3.7 trillion in debt over stupid shit. We can't have free healthcare. We can't have free education because we spend our money on frivolous, stupid shit. So we're going to have some type of government reform if we want free healthcare across the board and free education across the board. We're so entitled in America that we think everything is supposed to just be given. It does not work that way.
Listen, what happened to the saying? If you don't work, you don't eat. How about that? Y'all forgot? Y'all don't remember the old people telling us that? If you don't work, you don't eat. Okay. I mean, and we all fall on hard times. Maybe not every single individual, but majority of us have fallen on hard times where we might need to rely on, whether it's a welfare system or whether it's a loan or whether it's moving back in with your family or whether it's, those things happen. However, if that's your pedigree, if you just a lazy motherfucker, no, that ain't it. I'm sorry, you just gonna have to rough it out. You just gonna have to rough it out. It is what it is. I think when it comes to the welfare situation, there's too many independent situations to make one big vast rule for everybody. There's different qualifications, different but I think if it was like a two-parent or it doesn't have to be man and wife, or you guys can be girlfriend and boyfriend. I don't know what it is. As long as you guys are both the parents of the child and you guys are cohabitating, I think we should give some huge slack. Like, hey, here's a $25,000 startup that you have to apply for, that you do not have to pay back, like a Pell Grant, but for your family. And then it's a one-time thing. Or maybe once every 25 years, every quarter century, boom. But I think when we have these welfare abusers, plus on top of all of our government debt, we all got to tighten up our belts. All of us.
All of us. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's I don't know. That's why I'm staying quiet on this one, because I don't want to, I don't know everybody's situation. There are some hardworking people out there that are just down on their luck, and unfortunately it's, they can't get up. They're not able to get their bearings, their feet. But I don't know.
Right. Because my situation, right? I was a stay-at-home mom for 12 years. My husband had a damn good job. I don't need a welfare for a no thing, right? And then he has this whole medical emergency and a medical situation to where now he cannot work, and we have to rely upon our government's system. So yes, you cannot completely dissolve the welfare system because it is very much needed. However, it does need to be reformed, because even in our situation, we still don't get everything we should be getting. We get the bare minimum. And that's only because he's considered quote unquote indigent. If he wasn't considered indigent, then I'd still be on the other side of the coin. Like, damn, anybody got some food stamps for Sam?
Right.
For real, like, So I get it. It's set in place for when you fall on hard times, when your life gets turned upside down. That is what the welfare system is for. It is not for you to sit around and have 15 kids because you don't want to work. No matter, and this isn't just specifically to one culture, this is across the board.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah,
this isn't just for one culture. All cultures do that.
there's some, I'm not going to throw their names out there, but there's some people, I won't say who they are, that they abuse the Social Security thing by making their kids stupid. Now, and maybe because they're bad parents, they're just Social Security babies on time. They're generational Social Security babies. So yeah, there are some people who abuse it, and then there's some people who aren't abusing it, and they're getting the tail end of it.
Because they, and I can't be upset because reality is they don't have the funds. They're giving me what they have. The only person I can be upset at is the person who's been on it for 50 years and hasn't made any strides to do anything other than that. That's the only person I can be upset at. Because if we're $3.7 trillion in debt as a country, I'm grateful that I get the food stamps that I get. Okay. Because we are too in debt for them to be handing me anything. If I was $3.7 trillion in debt, y'all better not come ask me for a fucking thing.
Okay. You are your broke baby daddy, bitch. Okay?
Period.
No. So, and a lot of people who misuse the funds, they don't even see it like you said earlier. There's a lot of entitlement. They don't see it as misuse. They're like, it's my reparations, or this is what they owe me, or there's some sob story or some victim, and this is no color related because, like I said, there are some people who love to. They know how to abuse the SSI, where they got their kids hooked up on drugs. What's that lady, Gypsy Rose? Her mama.
Yeah.
Yeah, fraud comes in all color, shapes, and sizes, and either way, it's time to call all of it out. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to feel invasive, but if you want to get to the source, baby, open up. Okay? Yeah, a path to independence. That's what it is. That's what I was saying. Maybe like a one-time, here's 20 grand, but you have to apply, you have to qualify, and here, not with super harsh stipulations and you got to jump through 50 million hoops. No. But, hey, if you are a family and you guys are struggling, and let us help you out. Let's get you out of that struggle. Not let's keep you there.
Right. Because I have 200 people on a waiting list for a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom efficiency apartment, and you've been in here for 5-10 years. Let's get you somewhere else.
Yeah.
Because you should be moved out of that season. We're not helping, we're hindering. We're enabling.
Yes.
Because where are people able to afford fentanyl?
Hello.
We're enabling this behavior.
Okay. Got their pack of cigarettes and their little tall boys or whatever they drink, their little Bush Lights or whatever. Please. Waiting on their check. My check didn't come. So, and I don't want to beat down the poor. That's not.
No.
Keep quiet. I don't want it, because there are some billion-dollar corporations that they need to get hit just as hard. Okay. And even harder, in my opinion, and even harder because they're taking advantage of a lot of stuff. So it's on both sides of the scale.
About $700 billion on low-income families with children, and about 80% of that goes to single moms. It's a subsidy system for single parenthood. It has been since the beginning of the war on poverty. And if you take that and you just take the total amount of money that we spend on families with kids, which is again close probably to $600-700 billion, and you divide it by, say, the bottom income third of the population, you come up with something like $60,000 per family. So we say we don't spend enough. We don't even know how much money you spend. There's no federal record of total spending on means tested programs for children. You have to go through the budget line by line and bring it out. And when you find it's an enormous amount of money, and we don't know where that money goes. If you were to go to any state, in the United States, and take any given family and ask the question, how much does this family get from welfare? No one knows the answer to that, because they're getting benefits from 6 or 7 programs at the same time. It's all disparate. The programs don't talk to each other, and there's no record on how much they get. So one of the clear things we ought to have is a clear record of what the family gets integrated, so we know that, okay? And we also ought to put that in to our poverty measurement system. We just were told, oh, we don't spend enough, and we have 1 in 5 children living in poverty today. Well, you have 1 in 5 children living in poverty because of that $600 or $700 billion that you spend. None of that is counted as income for purposes of poverty. It's all hidden. It's all off the books. And therefore, all the spending on any of these programs, by definition, has no effect on poverty because it's not counted as income. Food stamps is an income. Housing is an income. EITC is an income. It's all off the books. No matter how much you spend on it, it has no effect on poverty, except it makes it worse because you're going to reduce earnings. Earnings are counted. So you're going to have more poverty, not less, as a result of these programs.
Thank you. Whenever I hear about this topic, I remember the stuff on Black Lives Matter, where one of their goals was to get rid of the traditional Western prescribed family.
Yeah.
And it didn't prevent people from marching with them, despite their goal was to get rid of the family.
Primary goal of Marx and Engels.
Right.
Well,
Ms. Anwaka, is it true that many welfare programs don't require recipients to work?
It is true. When we look at a number of different programs, we see that either states have exempted individuals in their jurisdiction from work requirements, or that there are programs that just simply don't have them. And so those are loopholes that I think should be closed. And Congress can work with states to ensure that states are not waiving these requirements.
I'll give you guys just one more question, either one of you. Since this big explosion of what we'll call the welfare programs in the mid 60s, do you know what's happened to the birth rate in which the father stays around and doesn't stay around? What effect Lyndon Johnson's programs had on that?
Yes, when the war on poverty started, 1 in 7% of children were born outside wedlock. Today, it's 42%. It's particularly striking in the Black family, where the non-marital birth rate, the percentage of children were outside of marriage. The Black family survived slavery. It survived Jim Crow. It survived the Depression. It survived World War II. So when you get the beginning of war on poverty, about 16% of Black children were born out of wedlock. In comes the war on poverty, all these different programs, liberalization of these programs, and the Black family literally disintegrates within a decade. And now you have close to 70% of Black children being born outside wedlock, because that's what you pay for. You get what you pay for. And it's not just within Blacks, it's also now beginning to affect moderate income whites, Hispanics. Every low income family is suffering from that. You're very lucky that you have any marriage at all in the bottom half of the population, because they all pay penalties for the fact of being married.
Mr. Krishnamurthy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Mr. Rector. You've written welfare payments, quote unquote, increase dependency. Isn't that right? And in your opinion, dependency on welfare benefits is a bad thing, obviously.
No, I wouldn't say that. I would say that having welfare benefits is necessary. I'm not against the welfare state, but I believe that the incentives of the welfare state should help people to go upward rather than to fall apart and go downward. And
Well,
the system you have now.
Let me just jump in here. I'm talking about dependency. Over dependency on welfare benefits is a bad thing.
Long-term dependency certainly is, yes.
Let me bring your attention to something that happened at the Republican National Convention last summer. In this visual, Teamsters President Sean O'Brien said, quote, "The biggest recipients of welfare in this country are corporations," close quote. You don't dispute he said that, right?
I guess not.
In 2023, the Cato Institute, by no means a liberal think tank, found that the federal government spends more than $100 billion a year on what they call, quote unquote, corporate welfare. You don't dispute that they found that, right?
No, I guess not.
Now, Mr. Linden, according to the Brookings Institute, oil and gas companies annually receive $20 billion in direct federal subsidies that no other business in this country gets. And you don't dispute that the Brookings Institution found that either, right?
Nope, that's absolutely right.
Look, if we're going to talk about reforming the welfare state, Mr. Chair, let's also look at corporate welfare. In the words of Paul Ryan, the former speaker, quote, "Republicans can't make the case to the American people that Republicans are the reform party if Republicans won't reform the giant corporate welfare state in Washington." Chairman, this is a theme I'll be returning to on this committee as we proceed. Let me turn to my next topic. Sir, Mr. Rector, according to the Washington Post, you said the following, quote, "Is poverty harmful for childhood?" Question. I think not. You don't dispute that you said this, right?
No.
Let's explore if poverty is harmful. The NIH, under President Trump, found that poverty is consistently associated with academic achievement gaps as early as kindergarten. And by age 14, lower income students are, quote, a full year behind their peers. The NIH found, you don't dispute the NIH found that, right?
I could explain what I am saying in that quote if you want me to.
I'm asking you, you don't dispute that the NIH found that these academic
You don't want me to explain.
gaps
I don't
exist.
dispute. No, I don't.
I'd like to bring your attention to an Department of HHS study, which finds that childhood poverty is associated with, quote, developmental delays, chronic illness, and nutritional deficits. Mr. Linden, you don't dispute that the HHS found that, and I presume that you agree with them.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of studies that show childhood poverty has long-term negative effects for the children and the economy as a whole.
So academic gaps, development delays, along with chronic illness. Now, in addition, Mr. Rector, you said to the Heritage Foundation in 2007, quote, most poor children are supernourished. You don't dispute you said that, right?
That's exactly what the USDA data shows. Yeah, I've read the reports, very few.
You're not a doctor, right? You're not a medical doctor,
No,
right?
I am an expert in.
You're not a
food
medical
program.
doctor, are you?
I do know more about nutrition.
You know more about nutrition than a medical doctor.
I know more about nutrition and welfare programs than any doctor.
You're not a nutritionist, are you?
I know, I said exactly what I'm saying. If you want
It's a
to look
simple
at
yes or no
surveys,
question. You're not a
look-
nutritionist, are you?
No,
And you're not a
I'm an
dietitian.
expert in the food stamp program.
Sir,
and its
anybody who
nutritional
thinks that
effects.
anybody
You want
who
to talk
thinks-
about the food stamp program and its nutritional effects, or do you want to grandstand?
Anybody who thinks that childhood poverty is not harmful to children, unfortunately, should not be talking about whether these welfare programs benefit families or not. Let me turn your
Would you
attention
like
to
me
my
to
final
explain what I
topic
meant by
in
that?
my limited time. On January 31st, Politico quoted Donald Trump as promising to, quote, love and cherish Medicaid. Mr. Linden, you don't dispute that Politico reported that, right?
They definitely reported that.
Donald Trump also promised that, quote, the people won't be affected. Medicaid will only be more effective and better. That's what he said, right?
That's what he's promising.
Punchbowl News reported, quote, the Energy and Commerce Committee currently is eyeing up to $2 trillion in cuts to Medicaid. You don't dispute they reported this, do you, Mr. Rector? This is what Punchbowl News said.
I'm not aware of that.
Michael, can you tell us briefly what would happen if $2 trillion in cuts to Medicaid actually occurred in terms of the number of people who'd be dropped from Medicaid?
Yeah, tens of millions would lose coverage or benefits or both. There's just no way around it. Those level of cuts, there is not tweaks or efficiencies to be found that is 1/3 of total Medicaid spending at the federal level. It isn't there. It's not just one of the proposals that I've heard being batted around it would mean 36 million potential people would lose coverage. So there's a lot of harm here.
We are at a proverbial fork in the road. Either we keep President Trump's promise that the people won't be affected, close quote, or we accept trillions in cuts to our safety net programs that drop tens of millions of people, Americans, from the Medicaid rolls. This will not only affect them, this will devastate them. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you. Thank you. Paul Gosar.
Yeah, thank you.
When I'm back here, I want Nikki, when I'm on the StreamYards tab, I can't see if you deleted it or not. And I try and just highlight everybody's comments. So my apologies. Yeah, they get into it, y'all. But this is what we need. We need it. Okay.
He came with the receipts. He said, hold on, did you say this?
But I want to know, how much do those cost for you to print them out, sir?
Okay.
How much do those big old? I mean, we can't go digital yet. Y'all still talk about the 60s. We can't digitize this and save some money.
He said, hold on, sister. He said, I'm gonna give you the cue. And whenever I say this one word, you hop up here with these.
Oh gosh. Okay. He said this.
I love to see it. I love it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can explain it if you want, Michael. I'm an expert in food stamps. What? An expert in food stamps? Let's get to this corporate welfare, baby. Fuck them food stamps. Feed them kids.
There you go. No one's complaining about feeding children. Okay.
Boo. Fuck out my face. Boo. And this is only part 1. I don't know when part 2 is coming out. It might be today. Listen, we're here for it. We're here for it all. And you see, sister, when he started talking about black people have survived slavery and the depression, and she right there shaking her head. Mm-hmm. Sister girl, stop.
Happy Black History Month.
Okay. He doesn't have his mic on, so nobody can hear him.
I'm not entirely familiar with the
There you
specific.
go.
Okay, so we got an exemption on Medicaid, and we did it ourselves. It did not.
Okay, what
cut.
happened?
Was this was the work requirements and
No, it was just access. It's called access. It's the Medicaid. We got a waiver and we tried to hit different populations. So just looking at the incentivization or the growth of a product doesn't mean you're cutting people off, does it?
it depends on what you're doing.
That's all I wanted to hear, because
If
what
you're cutting-
you came across by saying it does.
Well,
No, 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 it's my time. It's my time. Hold on. It's my time.
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay. So if we're to look at using that FMAP, okay, and you're saying, listen, we're going to use inflation to carry it on and block that back to the states. Tell me how that disincentivizes good opportunities. Tell me how that does.
I can do that.
Go ahead, quickly.
So if you're block granting Medicaid and you're capping the growth of Medicaid below healthcare costs, by definition,
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I said capping it according to inflation.
But healthcare costs grow faster than inflation.
That's
in the
proven.
private sector. And in fact, the private sector grows faster than in the public sector. So if you are capping Medicaid costs below the growth of healthcare spending, then by definition, you are going to be cutting Medicaid funding for the states, and states will have to either reduce benefits or cut people off the rolls. And the savings, the important thing here is the savings are being considered here will be funneled into tax cuts for rich people and corporations. You're not putting those savings back into Medicaid. You're not saying let's make this.
Okay, so let's
saying,
read two of this.
Let's cut taxes for rich people.
So Ms. Wankua, I'm glad you brought up COVID. Because we went on the spending spree of $4.8 to $7 trillion. Not a single receipt exists out there. And NIH, we talk about the NIH doing this and that. This is the same NIH that gave us COVID. And an improper appropriation to how we took care of it. It's sick. So can you tell me a little bit more about, in your opinion, the discontinuous enrollment opportunities for Medicaid? How does it build up waste, fraud, and abuse?
Sure. So when we see during COVID, obviously, and frankly, during recessions, we tend to see the enrollments in Medicare and some of the other welfare programs increase. Now, that said, the economy's bounced back. And so as people gain employment, they should fall off things like SNAP. They should fall off certain programs, but we haven't seen that. And COVID supercharged that. Even with the child tax credit, for example, that was expanded, a Republican idea of the child tax credit, but it was expanded and morphed into universal basic income by paying it out in monthly increments to every household and removing work requirements. So when you remove work requirements, you provide waivers for states to allow, and you create these loopholes where states can certainly roll people into these different programs, regardless of what their resources are or their income. Then that's how you see these enrollments increase. And it's a shame that we're spending as much money as we are, and our enrollment numbers are not falling. That's telling us something.
Well, I tell you what, I'm so excited for this advent. Looking at this idea coming about a wellness. I can't tell you, I'm a dentist previously. So I love the fact that we're going to hopefully look at wellness. Okay. So I want to know more about this though. So this Families First Corona Response Act provided advanced federal funding, or the FMAP, to states to continuously enroll Medicaid beneficiaries. I want to get to this point. So what did the states do? They just continued. They just kept enrolling. In fact, they never even followed through. There was no accountability to everybody that was under this FMAP. Okay. For 3 years, we did this. So tell me how you would feel about that aspect.
Well, I mean, it's concerning when you have so many able-bodied people. We're not talking about people who have disabilities or are not able to work, but able-bodied people who are participating in programs like Medicaid because it's been expanded so much. You're talking about 60% of able-bodied adults on Medicaid, 25 million Americans who are reporting no earned income. So that's telling us that there are people who can work. We know that there are millions of open positions and they're participating in the Medicaid program, but they're not working. That's a problem with that needs to be fixed. And there's a loophole. There's something there that's broken that needs to be rectified.
And we're also seeing this fact that there's no accountability. The federal government's not going back, the states aren't going back and say, hey, listen, you had private insurance. Why did you take this? So there's no accountability whatsoever. So we just blanket across the board. I do want to thank you, Mr. Linden, because I think you're one of the people that supported my thing about McCarran-Ferguson revoking that in regards to healthcare. That's why I want to see new ideas, new advantages all the way across the board. So from that, I'll say thank you. I'll yield back.
Thank you, Congressman.
Well, thank you.
Next, we have Ms. Randall.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. It's delightful to get the chance to talk about healthcare access in this first subcommittee hearing. And I want to start out being a new member. And I don't know if this makes me a radical feminist or not. I am a married woman, but I don't have a man in my family. But I do believe that we need to make sure that access to the services that folks need is not, that we don't create additional barriers. And I believe that because of really personal experience. When I was 7 years old, my sister Olivia was born with microcephaly, which is a complex disability. The doctors didn't know how long she would live or if she would live. My dad had a good government civilian job, had good federal employee insurance, but it would not have covered all of the equipment and specialists that Olivia needed to survive in our family. But because the Washington state legislature in 1993 was one of the first states in the country to expand Medicaid, Olivia was able to survive and thrive in our family. Because of special education funding, she was able to go to school, be integrated in her classroom. And that is when I learned that government can play a role in making people's lives better, in ensuring that families have the tools to build strong futures, ensuring that children like my sister and my brother and I can be civically involved community members and can build better for our kids and our kids' kids. I'm also the first in my family to go to college. I benefited from financial aid when my parents got divorced. My mom, after being a primary caregiver for my sister, struggled to re-enter the workforce, and SNAP benefits made a difference for us. I, went on to break a lot of barriers in my family and was elected to the state senate, where I had the chance to chair the Higher Education and Workforce Development Committee for 5 years, where I heard story after story after story that was like mine and my family's. Working parents who were trying to go to school so that they could build a better future for their kids, who were penalized and who weren't able to dedicate the time to their schoolwork because they were trying to hit the work requirements. Students who were penalized because they got a little bit of a raise, a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of a raise, which meant that they lost their childcare benefits or their housing benefits or their food assistant benefits. Those cliffs are what keep so many families in poverty. And I also believe that we should tackle the marriage penalty. I've talked to a number of particularly disabled parents, who want to get married, who want to build a strong family unit, but who don't have the opportunity because they know that they will be made homeless by getting married and losing the benefits that are allowing their children to have healthcare and thrive. Mr. Linden, I don't know if you tracked any of Washington State's response to the Great Recession. I assume that it's like many states. We were forced to make some cuts to our safety net programs. Can you speak at all about any other states that made cuts to programs, safety net programs under the Great Recession, and what impact that had on families?
Yeah, absolutely. I think stepping back broadly, we know that when states and localities are forced to pull back on aid to struggling families because of economic resources, because the federal government has cut back, that the effects are very long-term. Certainly people get hurt right away, but there's something in the economic literature that we call scarring, sort of a, kind of a gross term, but it does capture the real long-term effects of people getting thrown out of these programs before they are able to pick themselves up. You see it in years and years afterwards. They have lower educational attainment, lower earnings, less attachment to the workforce, all the things that we want to see. You get the opposite of that. So I'm sure that happened in Washington State. It happened all over the country. It happened in other countries.
We definitely saw that impact in Washington State. And in fact, what we saw was a greater strain on the budget long term, because since we kicked folks off of programs that were allowing them to build themselves up, then we had to pay for housing and other safety net programs longer term, not only for the parents, but for the children as they grew up. Washington State, like many states in the country, also has a extensive workforce shortage. And one of the ways that we meet that is by ensuring that folks get credential attainment after high school. We have a goal of 75% credential attainment. None of that is possible if we are ensuring that families are not able to access education, to keep a roof over their head, to send their kids to childcare, and to thrive. So I hope that as we think about what is good for families and what is good for our economy, we remember that these programs provide support. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. We'll now go to the gentleman.
I really enjoyed her. Well-spoken, and she's a product of receiving benefits. I like that she brought up the special ed classes and how she got to realize how much the government does play a role. She was great representation of needing assistance and utilizing it to better yourself. I really enjoyed her and look forward to hearing from her in the future as a committee member. I liked her a lot. Yes, Nikki, if you make $1 over a limit, you can lose hundreds of dollars in benefits. That is just the facts.
Mm-hmm.
That is scary. So it's like that $1 isn't worth it. So let me not try and better myself.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Or let me risk committing fraud.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Very fine line.
I really can't afford to not work. However, I really can't afford to work and have to pay 100% of my food cost either.
Mm-hmm.
Then people have to deal with that, and they have
Yeah.
to make hard choices.
Mm-hmm. Being stuck in a rut at this boohoo job, living in the boohoo ghetto, because the minute I make $3 more, they're taking away $560 of food stamps. They're taking away however much the insurance cost, and whatever else that you might be receiving that's helping you get to your place. So it's almost a damn catch-22. Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this isn't just welfare, isn't just food stamps and SNAP. It's SSI, it's veteran care, it's a lot.
Yeah, welfare encompasses a lot of things.
It really does. Disabled people. My godson.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, baby, love you, miss you. He's having to rely on Social Security at his young age, at 28 this year. 28 he'll be this year. He's a baby. And he can't, he's got to be careful with his money too. You know what I'm saying? He had a mother pass away. You got to be careful with receiving any type of inheritance from her, because now he's cut off from this and cut off from that. Man, it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. Yeah, they want to keep you broke. And if you have 2 kids, that's right. Don't even talk about savings. Don't even talk about savings, right? Can't even stash you a little bundle here or there. You know, working tax returns as well. Mm-hmm. That's why they need to get the abusers off. That's right. That's true. That's true. It is what it is. It's gonna be unfortunate, baby. You on child number 8? Oh no, sweetheart. You got time to be doing all this, that, and the other. No. There's gotta be some stipulations. What about the kids? Well, you better tell their mama.
One from Texas, Mr. Sessions.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Mr. Richter, I'd like to play a game with you. What is the amount of money total that you believe a family of 4 that is married, 2 children, what is the amount of money that you believe that they should have total benefits for? By the way, I think I'm looking for you to help me in this endeavor.
Maybe you're trying to figure out how much they currently get.
Well, no, I think what I'm trying to say is if you go to the poverty level, poverty line,
Mhm.
and then you add in whatever amount of money you would choose to add in, what is that correct level that you believe would be something that would be a good number to say, if a person makes this much, what is that number?
I think that that you can very easily within the current system ensure that any family that has work could have enough benefits to get to say 100.
Yeah, well, I'm not saying that. Maybe I'll catch you off. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That the welfare system is designed to reinforce work and to supplement work. So
And that's what I said. I said married.
Right. So
and then what is that amount of money? I'm trying to look at work and then amount of benefits, because I think there ought to be a sliding scale up and down instead of you don't qualify or we do this or we penalize. It ought to be, okay, if we decided, I'm just going to say it, $100,000. I'm playing the game I want you to play. If you just said $100,000, Congressman Sessions, would be an amount of money that I believe a family of 4, husband at work, husband and wife that are married, they need $100,000, however you cobble it together, to live. And then we looked at the amount of money that they make.
Right.
And then we looked at the amount of money that they received benefits for. And we just said $100,000. That way we're not penalizing marriage. Now I could have this wrong, but that's one way to look at it. And then you would go and sit down with a person, whoever it might be, maybe it's a computer, and say, I work and my salary is this, and my wife's salary is this, and our tax level is this. Maybe they don't pay any taxes. To get to $100,000, I am allowed to add in benefits that look like the following matters, and that we encouraged marriage instead of then telling them, no, you don't qualify or what you do. Let them package together the things that they believe they needed the most. What kind of game is that? Is that too much of a articulation of maybe a philosophy?
No, I think that if you look at what we currently spend, if we're spending through the means tested welfare system close to $60,000 for every family that has an income in the bottom third of the population. It's a huge amount of money, which no one knows where it's going for the most part, but you can very easily within that system ensure that any family that has at least one working parent has an income, say 150% of the poverty rate. You can easily do that. But the current system, first of all the spending is hidden. It's not on the books. Okay.
I agree with that. And we put it on the books.
No, you don't. If you look at the measurement of poverty, 95% of the $1.6 trillion you spend every year is off the books. It's not counted. It has no effect
I
on
didn't
poverty.
say you wouldn't count it. I'm saying we would count it.
Oh, you definitely count it. And then you have a system that has incentives that promotes people to work.
I agree.
And to get married. And you get rid of all the fraud, which is in there, which is huge. And you can definitely do that for considerably less than you're spending today. But you have to be honest about what the benefits are, who's getting them. You have to count that in terms of measuring poverty. I mean, you have a $1.6 trillion welfare system.
Well, I've read Phil Graham's book.
Yes.
I get that.
Okay.
I'm trying to reverse engineer it.
Yes.
I'm not trying to take the time of this important panel. I'm trying to say, is that something that might be a better
Yes.
way to look at? Because I think it is. For instance, the gentlewoman just before me talked about her mother had to probably quit work because of her sister. Not unusual. I have a Down syndrome son. There are people in family emergencies and they cut down one person working and all of a sudden much of their income is cut in half. So I have dealt with these circumstances. I'm trying to say, seems like we could have a workbook, a paper that would say, okay, here's where you got to be. You're at this, and our job is to try and get you there. Our job, and then make it easier for someone that is married to stay married. And because there's that way, there's less back and forth. Okay. I'm interested in getting in touch with you. I'm interested in seeing if we could design a sheet of paper that could be a potential model of saying, if we get to this, how do we get to this? How do we encourage that? And then seeing if we can float that with any ideas around it. You're very kind. Thank you for playing my game. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Ms. Simon?
I like
Thank
that
you so much,
game he
Mr.
played.
Chair, and thank you to our witnesses who've come here today to talk about the issues surrounding family and the health of our families, the health of our children. It's the reason that I came to the United States Congress. For the folks who are listening in, there are women and mothers who are escaping domestic violence and families who have small children who are trying to finish school. The farmer that called my office out of district, so nervous that there's the potentiality of his family losing benefits because our system will count his small amount of land and his farm equipment as assets, and he has a severely disabled child. I care so much, as you all do. I believe we uniquely all have a deep place in our professional and personal spaces for the American family. I don't believe that I'm making an assumption, so I'll ask, are there any members of the witnesses who came here today that were single parents? Any members, any witnesses who've ever collected SNAP or WIC? I appreciate it because we need people on both sides, our advocates, our organizers, our academics. I was a teen mom, a single teen mom, and I had my daughter while I was in college, community college, and I worked 3 jobs, and I got $28 of food stamps. And because I'm legally blind and I wasn't able to drive, I would have to catch a bus an hour in Martinez in Cocoa County in the Bay Area to get that $28. And at one point, it just felt like it was just too much, but I kept my WIC. And I would go to the grocery store every month. You only get WIC once a month. And I would go and I was humiliated every single time purchasing beans and rice and milk and being asked to put back because the milk maybe was 2 ounces more than the WIC stamps cost. Being poor is hard. Trying to live up to the values in this country of working hard and raising children. In fact, I got married later on. My husband died of leukemia. I will tell the story every single day. My 13-year-old is at school right now in Washington, D.C. It is a snow day. I am a single mom and a widow. No one's there to pick her up. I'm asking her to wait on the stairs. So when we're going to talk about families, let's really talk about families. We've talked about so many of the stats that are put before us. I only have one question, but I want to give a little bit more background. During our last work week, members, I took members of my leadership of our party on a tour of University of California's Benioff Children's Hospital. It's an amazing facility, one of the state-of-the-art burn centers. It's a sickle cell center. They provide stem cell transplants to children. There are fears that much of this federally funded immediate care may be denied to low-income families who are just trying to survive. They're also really thinking about, the leaders of this hospital, they're thinking about what they're going to do should our administration attack the 340B drug pricing program. Again, as someone who spent a lot of time with my husband when he was living and dying, trying to move through cancer, the program is essential not only for our adults fighting life-saving or life-critical diseases, but for our children. I also met with our federally qualified health centers, diabetes care, prenatal care. When I was pregnant as a teenager, I got all of my prenatal care from Planned Parenthood. I have one question. Actually, the question, I have a statement actually before the question, and let me get it. Let me get it clear. What I heard earlier was this estimation of poor women should immediately work when they give birth to their children, or it's really important to have work requirements. You know, I agree that folks should work. I've run organizations that put young women to work, but we don't have the same expectation for middle class and wealthy women. We're asking them to stay at home, take care of your babies. So I'm curious, Mr. Linden, with all the hypocrisy in this conversation, we know that poor folks struggle to just make it. And they're pathologized every step of the way. When we're talking about the plan to cut Medi-Cal at $2 trillion, give me 7 seconds of what the effects could be on our low-income families in this country.
Sure, 7 seconds. We would cut millions of people from their life-saving healthcare, and for what? To fund tax cuts for billionaires. That's what the discussion is right now in Congress. Should we or should we not take healthcare away from low and moderate income families so that we can have more room to give tax cuts to billionaires and corporations? I think the American people would be pretty unhappy to find that's what's under discussion here.
I appreciate it, and I yield back. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. The great economist Milton Friedman once quipped that you can either have a welfare state or you can have open borders, but you shouldn't have both. And I don't think you should have either, for one. We've talked and we've heard a lot over the past 4 years about root causes of mass illegal immigration into our country. And I'd like to perhaps suggest a few of them, and they're coming from the other side of the aisle, and that we are creating a welfare state that incentivizes mass migration into our country from every country on the globe that is poorer than we are. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle like to say that illegal aliens can't get welfare. I think that is verifiably not true. In fact, illegal aliens and their families can receive welfare from about over a dozen different programs. I'll list out a few of them: food stamps, child nutritional programs, temporary assistance for needy families, supplemental security income, child care and development block grants, the earned income tax credit, the child tax credit, Obamacare premium tax credit, Obamacare cost sharing subsidies, Medicare, Medicaid, the Children's Health Insurance Program, Pell Grants, student loans, Head Start, public housing, and the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery fund. Whenever we think about how much money we're giving to illegal aliens, the numbers really are absolutely staggering. And I can give you just a few of them. You can pull them up here. We spend on illegal aliens and their families over $3 billion in primary and secondary education, $580 million on limited English proficiency programs, $239 million for migrant schooling, $2.8 billion for Head Start programs, over $8 billion in uncompensated hospital expenditures, nearly $1.6 billion for Medicaid births, almost $8 billion a year on Medicaid fraud, $5.4 billion for Medicaid for U.S.-born children of illegal aliens. In terms of law enforcement costs, we spend almost $1.7 billion on federal incarceration of illegal aliens, $4.1 billion for enforcement and removal operations, $8.6 billion for custom and border protections, $1.7 billion for other ICE operations, $237 million for state criminal alien assistance programs, over $8 billion for alien minors, and I'm going to keep going. $191 million for DoD National Guard deployment. If we look at just at welfare, we spend over $1.5 billion for meals in schools for illegal aliens and their children, $5.8 billion for SNAP, just under $1 billion for WIC, $1.4 billion for TANF programs, $991 million for Child Care and Development Fund, $334 million for public housing, $600 million for social supplemental security income. I think in a context of a federal debt that's at $36 trillion, I think that is utterly absurd. As it all comes out, according to various estimates, we're spending right around $50 billion on the federal level on illegal aliens and their families, and about $100 billion a year on the state level as well. Mr. Linden, I'd like to start with you, and I know we only have a little bit of time, but do you think it makes sense that we provide welfare benefits for illegal aliens and their children?
I think it doesn't make sense to spend multiple times that on subsidies to corporations and rich people.
But do you think we should be taxing working class American families to pay for welfare for illegal aliens?
I think we should make
business
sure,
being here.
I genuinely believe we should make sure that the welfare and healthcare and nutrition programs that we have in this country are going to the people who are entitled to them, who are in the law, that the law says who should get them. But I also think that if we're worried about the federal deficit and debt, we are spending multiple times what you just described there on tax cuts for rich people and corporations. And I don't understand the focus.
There's a difference between providing tax cuts for American citizens and providing handouts for illegal aliens.
Huge beneficiaries of these tax cuts are foreign investors.
I hope you guys continue. I hope your side of the aisle continues defending welfare for illegal aliens, because Republicans will win every single election in perpetuity if that's your view. And Mr. Chairman, I yield my time. Thank you.
Well,
Oh,
thank you. Have another
well,
person
damn.
getting used to here.
I mean,
Nikki, I hear Nikki in the comments. She's saying, he's trying to shoehorn immigration into this. Well, like we said earlier, welfare is a very broad system.
and he just
Well-
he just broke it down, all the money that is being spent, and it's like, oh wow, okay.
Mm-hmm. And while you
let's
getting
add that
nickeled
to
and
the list.
dimed, yeah, you getting nickeled and dimed, and these people coming in, listen, living great, the American dream. Yeah, illegal immigrants, not aliens. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can't starve them, but we damn sure don't have to offer them luxury above our own citizens. Come on now.
Right, that doesn't
No.
make sense.
And prior to this, when I don't recall her name, but the lady that said she was legally blind had to take a bus and only got $28 in food stamps and whoop. I really appreciate her testimony as well. And I'm loving how well balanced this panel is. Not so much the witnesses, the guests, but the people asking the questions and their testimonies. I like to hear things like that. I really do. Yeah, stop buying condoms for foreign countries and feed people instead. Okay.
Exactly.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I've never heard, we're out of food stamps, the illegal immigrants got it first. No, but we did hear that the illegal immigrants got the FEMA before the people in the hurricane victims. We have heard that before. We ain't got money for the fire people. We ain't got money for the hurricane. They didn't tell us they gave it all to the immigrants, but yeah. Texas, come get him. So, Will, I mean, again, this is touchy. That's why I'm trying not to give too much commentary. It's such a broad spectrum, and I think we just should really start with corporate welfare before we worry about personal welfare.
Yeah, agree.
Let's start there with these companies, and then let's work on individuals who are abusing it and all of that. So, yeah. No, Coco said no.
Mr. Bell from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So let's level set here. It's no secret that Republicans want to cut federal programs that hardworking families rely on in order to fund tax cuts for the wealthiest among us. And Democrats will continue to fight for programs like Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security because we can't turn our backs on the people that need us most. A month ago, I was an elected DA back home, and I'm going to give you all a piece of advice that I got a long time ago. You want to fix your public safety. You want to fix public safety? Fix your health systems. So there's a public safety component to ensuring that everyone has access to quality health care. So like my colleague on the other side, I'd also like to play a game. And we should be able to find bipartisan consensus that waste, fraud, and abuse within federal programs is intolerable. We should also support inspectors generals and law enforcement personnel that have dedicated their careers to rooting out this fraud and recovering lost funds from bad actors. Instead, I've been very disappointed and dismayed for that fact that President Trump spent his first week in office firing inspectors generals and career prosecutors, including people who were tasked with investigating and preventing fraud within the very programs our Republican colleagues claim are ripe for abuse. I want to stress the importance of our independent and nonpartisan inspector generals. The work they do should be commended. So let's also play a money or investment game. For the relatively small investment made in offices of inspector generals, the taxpayer receives a massive return on that investment. In fiscal year 2023, inspectors generals detected and clawed back as much as $93 billion in taxpayer funds. By one measure, for every $1 invested in an office of the inspector generals, $26 is saved by their oversight work. So, Mr. Linden, President Trump fired the HHS Inspector General in January. What impact will this have on the ability for people to defraud Medicare and Medicaid?
It will make it a lot easier. And exactly as you said, Congressman, if we are really interested in rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse, I'm all for that. We should be spending every single dollar of American taxpayers with responsibility and oversight. And when we find those savings, let's reinvest them into the people who actually need those benefits and who actually deserve those benefits, who will grow our economy. Let's not give that money to the wealthy and corporations.
And staying on that, what signal does removing a watchdog send to bad actors intentionally seeking to defraud the government?
It says that it's open, it's open season for fraudsters. If these inspectors generals are not on the job looking out for the American taxpayer, who's doing it? Is it Elon Musk? I don't trust him.
Our colleagues on the other side push this common misperception that increasing access to federal programs will lead to rampant fraud and abuse. Why is that untrue?
It's simply not true. We can absolutely increase access and the generosity of benefits, the availability of benefits, at the same time making sure that those benefits are going to the people who we intend them to go to, and stopping scammers and fraudsters from taking advantage of the low and moderate income people who need those benefits.
Without independent inspectors generals at the wheel, effective oversight diminishes and programs that Congress established become far more vulnerable to waste, fraud, and abuse. If my colleagues across the aisle were truly serious about examining how to cut down on waste or fraud, then President Trump's purge of independent watchdogs would be a flashing red light telling us something is wrong. We should come together, make sure that independent inspectors generals are nominated, confirmed, and committed to a career that is free from political influence and games. Thank you, and I yield my time to the ranking member.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bell. Inspectors General, Mr. Rector, let me ask you this question. What is your opinion about the utility of having inspectors general at the agencies where they're supposed to be rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse?
Well, that's fine, but you actually have to work and do something about the reports they give you. For example, the Inspector General at the IRS has told us for decades that there's about a 37% fraud rate in the EITC. Now, I've read all those reports. I've done all that analysis. So I could sit down here this afternoon and tell you exactly how to prevent all that fraud, prevent the money from going out the door in the first place, because it doesn't do any good to have an audit of 10,000 people when you have a caseload of 22 million. You say over and over again, there's fraud, fraud, fraud. Nothing is done. I can tell you right now, I could stop every single bit of that fraud in the EITC. I already written out how to do it. Okay, so the question is whether you want to act on that fraud and act on those reports, or whether you want to continue the fraud to flow out that door. The EITC is noted for having a high fraud rate. The reason for that is it's the only program that the government correctly audits. There are no meaningful audits in food stamps. There are none in Section 8. And if you had a good audit on them, you would find equal fraud rates there as well. Okay, but then you have, when you know what the fraud is, you know how it's done, you have to stop it. We have known how the fraud is done in the EITC and the ACTC for decades, but there's nothing that is done to stop it. I could stop it tomorrow afternoon.
We'll give my good buddy here, Mr. Krishnamurthy, a follow-up.
So I'm with you on this, which is what I hear you saying is do the audit, but then act on it.
Yes.
So the utility of inspectors general is high, but you have to act on their advice.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the new gentleman from Virginia, Mr. McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is immoral and indefensible to use taxpayer dollars to support a border invasion. Illegal aliens the criminals are robbing, raping, and killing the American people. It's also indefensible and immoral to put boys in girls' sports and boys in girls' bathrooms, and to allow this fentanyl being produced in China to come across the southern border and poison the American people. More people die every year from fentanyl overdose than died in the Vietnam War. They say age 18 to 45 is the #1 cause of death in the country. I think it's also immoral and indefensible to spend $1.6 trillion on these programs with no record of where that went. I think I heard testimony. Is that correct, Mr. Richter? $1.6 trillion, and we have no idea where it's going and how it's measured. Is that right?
That is correct. And to the extent that you have any measures, they hide it. Okay.
That is why President Trump got a mandate. There are two things missing in our country right now: trust. President Trump is bringing back trust because he is doing what he campaigned on. He got the popular vote and he got the electoral college. But he's also bringing back fairness. There's 80% of Americans, regardless of race, religion, or creed or party, believe that it is wrong to have boys and girls sports. Yet for some reason, our colleagues on the other side think that's okay. I think it's immoral and indefensible. I also think it's indefensible that there is no clear record of how much money each family gets. Is it $100,000? Is it $50,000? We have no idea. Miss, I hope I don't pronounce it wrong. Onwuka?
Onwuka.
Onwuka. I really, really appreciate your comments on the family, the breakdown of the nuclear family. You know, I heard Mr. Rector say it doesn't make any sense why every single safety net program is against the family. Is that how you said that, Mr. Rector? That's correct. That's just indefensible. And it makes no sense. And, you know, when I heard you say it makes no sense, but it makes sense to me why they're doing this, because the strength of our country is that our religious values, our Judeo-Christian values, this country was founded in the church, but it's also the strength of the nuclear family. And you remember on the Black Lives Matter website, it used to say their purpose was to break down the nuclear family. So when you say you don't know why they're doing it, I think they're telling us. And when someone's telling you why they're doing something, you should believe that. I would say that our social safety net should focus on supporting the truly poor and vulnerable for able-bodied individuals that need assistance. And I would say work requirements for welfare programs are essential because they encourage self-sufficiency, reduce long-term dependency, and help individuals gain the skills and experience needed to achieve financial independence. Ms. Onwuka, in your testimony, you stated that an estimated 24.6 million able-bodied adults on Medicaid reported no earned income. And no one ever drops off the program. So are they always poor forever? And during the pandemic, that picked up. What factors contribute to this large number of non-working recipients?
Well, in part, it has to do with how people are enrolled and whether they qualify. And whether you're talking about Medicaid, SNAP, TANF, some of these other programs, there are lots of loopholes that can easily either roll people into some of these programs or waive the eligibility requirements. And so I think that's where the concern is. And if I may just make a quick point, I appreciated hearing some of the personal stories. My family, I'm an immigrant. I'm a naturalized citizen. So I came to this country and I grew up in a very poor neighborhood. And a lot of the people on programs that we're talking about today are my classmates. And I recognize that the ones who did well were the ones who had parents who were working and managed to move from dependency programs into independence and move their way. They saved and bought a house like my family did and moved out of the poor neighborhoods and away from the negative influences there. And so I think that my colleagues who want to see welfare reform are not doing it from an incompassionate place, but actually from a compassionate place to say, you know what, we want you to be able to determine to be a master of your own destiny. And that is by making sure you're moving from dependency into independence and fruitfulness. And that comes with some of these tougher things that need to be done.
So I was abandoned as a child at 5 years old. I ended up in foster care system, 9 different elementary schools, and we had some of those programs as well. But we, by the strength of a family and working hard, we got our way out of that. Mr. Linden, do you believe there's dignity in work?
Absolutely.
You know, one of the things I hear all around my district is we cannot find workers at our restaurant and our other business. And so we need to, it's irresponsible to not know how much money is being spent and where it is being spent. And that's why I'm so glad that President Trump got a mandate. And I trust Elon Musk. In just 2 weeks, he's identified millions and millions of dollars in waste, fraud, and abuse that the American people suspected, but we could not get a clear answer. And he's just getting started. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you very much. We'll
that Mr. McGuire or whatever his name is, boy, he's something else, ain't he? Well, why don't you go tell? Never mind, I was gonna be ugly. Let me not.
Mr. Krishnamurthy has a couple things.
Yes, I just wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping here. First, I want unanimous consent to enter this article by the World Economic Forum titled, quote, "New Research Busts the Myth of Welfare Dependency," which summarizes economic research showing the belief that social safety net programs cause dependency is not based on reality and nothing more than a misleading myth. I'd like to enter that into the record.
Okay, we'll do that.
then I'd like unanimous consent to enter into the record a report by the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities titled Medicaid Work Requirements Could Put 36 Million People at Risk of Losing Health Coverage. This report estimates 36 million people could lose Medicaid coverage if Republicans condition health coverage on a variety of requirements that are currently under consideration by the Energy and Commerce Committee.
Thank you. We'll enter that into the record. Now we'll ask you if you want to do a closing statement.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for devoting your time, and thank you to the audience for your attention as well. First of all, I was moved by the different stories, personal stories, your own, Ms. Onwuka, as well as Mr. McGuire and Mr. Bell and Ms. Simon. I think that where social safety net programs work, they're transformative, and they enable people who are in real need to overcome that need and do great things and to live the American dream. However, I will be the first to concede that there could be improvements, but can we do these improvements? Can we work on these improvements in a thoughtful, bipartisan manner? I think the answer is yes. And so, for instance, with regard to work requirements, which Ms. Onwuka talks about, I think that more Democrats would be interested in working on this issue if they also heard about potential supports with regard to career technical vocational education that enables people to get the skills to acquire and keep the jobs that are out there in the workforce that we need them to fill. I think more Democrats would also be very interested in working on this issue if we could talk about the issue of childcare, which is dramatically scarce, not only for poor people, but for all people. I think everyone in this room who has ever had to pay for childcare knows how prohibitively expensive it is and how we talk about a marriage penalty. There's a child penalty in this country right now that is operating discourage family formation and discourage all the things that we want good to happen in this country. So I would just respectfully submit, Mr. Chairman, that if we could also talk about these issues in the context of the ones that you are talking about, I think we could really have a thoughtful discussion. Finally, I respectfully submit cuts of the magnitude being contemplated in the Energy and Commerce Committee or the Ways and Means Committee, cuts to the tune of $2 trillion to Medicaid would absolutely be devastating to the tens of millions of families, especially on Medicaid expansion, who are benefiting from those supports today. In my home state of Illinois, about 700,000 to 800,000 Illinois residents are on Medicaid expansion. Are many of them able-bodied adults? Absolutely. Are many of them working? Yes. Are many of them incapable of affording private health insurance without these supports? The answer is absolutely, positively, yes. That is why they crucially depend on Obamacare. They crucially depend on it. And so if we're going to take those supports away from them, they will not have access to health care, plain and simple, even as they continue to work, even as they struggle, even as they raise their children. So that is the question on the table for my good friends on the other side, which is, I understand you are looking for places to find money. I respectfully submit, do not find money on the backs of people, poor working people who cannot get access to health care in any other way than through Medicaid and these crucial safety net programs. With that, I want to say thank you, Mr. Chair, for your indulgence, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. I'd like to make my closing statement and kind of go over where by the way, Ms. Onwuka, I wish we heard more from you. You're just tremendous, and I wish we didn't have just 5 minutes per person here. We'll have to bring you back for another panel on some other topic. Okay, first of all, when I put together this hearing, it was not my intent that we might be talking about tax policy at all, or even money that can be saved through these programs. We can save money, but the problem with these programs isn't, the biggest problem to me is not that they cost too much. It's that our current programs, as Mr. Oh, and by the way, the only example that I heard today in which somebody threw out we can do something with the money we save is Mr. Rector, who suggested taking some of the money we save on the abuse and putting it into changing the earned income tax credit so wasn't so hating of married couples like it is today. Okay, the purpose of this committee is saying that, well, we expanded the welfare state overwhelmingly. What we did is we created a huge disincentive to raise children with a mother and father at home. I think that's incontrovertible. I think there are all sorts of hypotheticals you can come up with, but Mr. Rector mentioned today a hypothetical in which you would penalize somebody $28,000 for marrying the father of her children. I would hope we would think that that was bad public policy. We did not get into, though it'd be interesting to look at, the fact that there are some very scary progressive type people who dislike marriage and dislike men in the home. I'm thinking, of course, Marx himself, the radical feminist, Kate Millay and that crowd who were hanging around in the 60s and really just wanted to get the man out of the home. And while I can say they were extremists that didn't appeal to a lot of people, my good friends in the Democrat Party sometimes have a hard time saying no to their extremist friends. Okay, I realize there are many great single parents. I know them. We all know them. Nevertheless, it's an uphill climb. And in my opinion, we passed bills on here dealing with crime problem, drug problem, even the education problem. I talked to school superintendents about this. All these things are made worse by the obvious incentive the federal government has right now in discouraging the old-fashioned nuclear family. And this is not something that just happened in a vacuum. Depending on the year you pick out, in the 60s, in the 50s, 4 to 6% of the American, 4 to 7% of the American families, when there was a new birth, it was out of wedlock. We're right now over 40%. That's a huge difference. And in my opinion, it happened largely because of this huge welfare system with 90 programs or whatever Mr. Rector said, all with a marriage penalty in them. And I think as the result, people have understandably changed their behavior. That might be the only way they change their behavior. But when you're going to 4 to 40%, I think it's pretty obvious. I was disappointed that upon looking at the $28,000 penalty that Mr. Rector laid out, that Mr. Linden came back and said, our problem is we got to put more money in these programs. 28,000 is enough. We don't need a $38,000 or $48,000 penalty for getting married. So in any event, otherwise I thought it was a good program. I think you all added something to the mix. And like I said, I hope people in Congress, both in the bill coming up in the near future and for a period longer than that, spend some time when they pass legislation and wonder or spend some time analyzing whether they're new program or old programs or the 90 programs Mr. Rector brought up, whether those programs are overly favoring the option of not being married or otherwise. And I will say one other thing. When I get around my district, there are two things I hear frequently. People who have relatives who are not getting married to get the benefits. It is so common, or friends not getting married to get the benefits. And in something that was brought up by Mrs. I think was it Mrs. Could have been. One of them brought up the idea that they, in their life, had to stop working because of, you could say, the generosity of these programs. But if you talk to your employers, particularly employers who hire people in that, say in that $14 to $20 range, you again and again find examples because it penalizes them and they begin to lose their benefits. So I was glad she pointed that out, that that's a problem with these systems. I think the biggest problem is discourages marriage, but the secondary problem is no question it discourages work and improving yourself along those lines. So in any event, we'll only have to say something here. We got to take care of my business too. With that, and without objection, all members have 5 legislative days within which to submit materials and additional written questions for the witnesses, which will be forwarded to the witnesses. If there's no further business without objection, this subcommittee stands adjourned. Thank you.
All right, man.
Ooh-wee. That subcommittee stands adjourned, and so do we, ladies and gentlemen. So do we. Yikes. I'm going to have to go back through some of those policies that were brought up, and I'm going to have to do some digging on some of this. Very unfortunate that feeding America, or hell, immigrants included, is such an issue. I ain't got no problem with Department of Defense. Child, feed these people. Okay, that's the least of it. Now, as far as, the SNAP benefits and all that other stuff, like I said, I'll have to look in a little bit deeper. And, the housing. So, I think that's where we'll end off with y'all today. We are definitely taking a break tomorrow. And I'm not sure what we have going on for this weekend. We got some stuff going on, but I'm just not sure where it's all falling into place. Coco, I saw up here, you said, Mama, you said you would like to discuss his issues on our panel one day. maybe we can come back Friday and just have an open panel where we all just kind of come up here and chop it up about the things we've heard this week.
Yeah, that was one of the things we had discussed the other day was what to do on Friday. And I don't have nothing going on.
Yeah, same
I
here.
could
Okay,
definitely
cool.
do
So
a
yeah, we could do
sound
a little
off.
Friday. Yeah, a little sound off Friday. Because it's quite a bit. We went through the trans, we went to the welfare, we've done Doge. That's a lot of information for us to compact into our in our brains. So yeah, we could definitely do a sound off board for sure, and let everybody that's been in the comments, y'all come on up and let's speak freely.
Absolutely.
Okay. So this was a good one. It got a little tense, but you know, when you're talking about money, it's gonna get tense. Whether it's yours or whatever, you're gonna get a little tense.
Right.
That's it. That's all. Thank y'all again for being here and supporting us, getting us through our watch hours. We are still on our road. And shout out to the replay gang. Shout out to Miss Parker. I was hanging out with her yesterday. Some of her people stopped by, left us some comments on the replay, came down. Shank Rock, he's from her crew over there. I had a good time last night. Very, I left it on the community wall. It was a sad story to hear about, but informative. She did a wonderful live over there. So salute to Miss Parker. And thank you to everybody that's come through our chat. Nikki, Kylie, Coco, Will Intensive, Reef came through. Again, Shank Rock, thank you for coming through. Observing Stuff was here as well. Ooh-wee. Thank y'all so much for letting us be in your earpiece. And thank y'all for participating in the chat. We truly appreciate it. All right, y'all. Happy hump day. Y'all be easy. Peace.
Toodles.
Toodles.